evening, everybody. It is May the 11th, 2026. We're joined by a lovely friend of the show, Mr. Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News. Tony, how are you doing on this fine Monday evening? We are about a month away from the 2026 draft. How are you feeling? How is your life? What is going on?
I feel fantastic. You know, it's a beautiful time of year where life gets busier because my kids are playing baseball and I have no time for anything. So I'm staying up even later to watch random Russians and Finns for the NHL draft as I narrow down my rankings that everyone online yells at me about.
Attaboy, man.
It's the best time of year, truly.
Yeah, man, I totally get you. It's a fantastic time of year. It's crunch time. I actually, my entire day today was finishing data sets on about 5 or 6 guys, and it's very strange because it feels like just yesterday we started looking at these guys. But the plan for today is a little different. This is something people have been asking about since the last time you were on the show, and that's to do a little bit of a trip backwards through time, a little bit of fun, go back all the way as far as we can to the glory years of 2020, the best years of my life. I'm sure you would agree, you know, a really great time to be alive.
Who didn't grow during the pandemic?
I know.
That really was when I became the person I am and the person that most people online seem to hate lately.
I know. It's amazing how formative those years were. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through a little bit every year and some things that we learned, some of our hits, some of our misses, some of the things we've learned and maybe still haven't learned after half a decade of doing this, which is kind of weird. We're going to go back to 2020. I think that's where we're comfortable starting, I would say, 2020.
Yeah. I can pull up my 2019 rankings, but they're on a website that no longer exists.
Right. We don't need to do that, though. We don't need to go back that far because I think both of us are a little more foolish then than we are now, although we are still relatively foolish, you know?
I mean, as I pulled up my 2020 rankings, I went, why would anyone format anything this way? So
right. Yeah.
There's growth.
Yeah, there is some level of growth here. So what we're gonna do, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go. I'm just looking for the right scene here on my little OBS thing here, if I can find it. Yeah. So I am going to share my screen. And I believe Tony's still coming through here. So if he isn't, I'll know very quickly. All right. So here's what we're going to do. So let's start in 2020. So if you're obviously watching the show, there's no faces on camera, but we're both still here. I mean, how do you want to do this, man? Like I think 2020, I guess big picture, like, is there anything you want to point out as like you feel like is a big win, or do you want to start with how dumb we look?
I will start with this in 2020. In 2020, I had a tier of 4 players at the top, and everyone called me stupid. And those 4 players were Lafreniere, Byfield, Lucas Raymond, and Tim Stützle.
Right.
I had Marco Rossi right outside of that in his own tier, kind of before anyone else came up. But those 4 players were the guys I had in the top tier. I had Lucas Raymond above Tim Stützle, which is a tiny little win in my book because I think he's a better player. But like everyone, I was an idiot, and I had Lafreniere and Byfield at number 1 and 2, despite the fact that, like, I had so many concerns about Lafreniere all year long.
Yes.
Like, I was openly saying that Byfield, Raymond, Stützle were all players that more than deserve to be in the same tier. Byfield's looks awesome at moments, and he's been pretty solid for the Kings. And I think maybe in a different system, he's a little bit of a different player, a little bit more high producing. But having Lucas Raymond and Tim Stützle in the same tier made a lot of sense to me back then, even though everyone thought I was an idiot.
Right.
And it looks great now. And as for a downside, like, I had Jake Sanderson down at 8 as the second best defenseman in the draft class.
It's better than me, man.
Pretty dumb. I did have Anton Lundell right behind him at 9, and everyone thought I was a little bit silly for that. The one I will point out is it this class? No, it's not. But there was a lot of guys in this draft that are very like what could have been with a Noel Gunler or a Jacob Perreault. There were so many guys in Lucas Reichel. Like, there were so many guys in this draft class that I think were affected by by just the pandemic and everything, right? Like I had Paterka in Murat Kuznetsov in the early 20s, and those guys turned out to be great. But like there was a lot of guys in this draft class that are certainly questionable. And also, I got to mention my boy from that year, Alexander Pashin at 44. What an idiot I was.
Oh,
But
well.
man, is he fun to watch play hockey sometimes.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a few takeaways that, at least for me, I'm reading over this. I mean, I think I would be curious as to your answer to the question of like, why do you think a player like Jack Quinn, who was a top 10 pick, and you see him with Buffalo now, why do you think, and the answer might very well be, I don't know, but why has he kind of stuck around in the NHL and been what he is for Buffalo when guys like Gushchin and Gunler and a number of other players like Holtz just haven't worked out in the same way? Like, I gotta wonder, like, I know the pandemic happened and all of that, but I do really wonder, because I remember watching Jack Quinn back in those days, and I felt, I mean, I still watch him in the NHL, and it's like in the top half of the ice, you see a lot of really good ability. Like that finishing ability is clearly evident, and if you put him in the right position to get there and be active in that area, then he can do really well. But I look at guys like, I remember Lucas Reichel against men in Germany, and the grind in his game was kind of what I really loved. And it just seems like in the NHL, part of me wonders if it's just like his style of play. It's almost like there's too much responsibility in a way. And it's like, you better be really good, because you can't be like sheltered and pigeonholed into a more offensive role like some of these other guys. Like, it's very interesting. I think that's going to be a bit of a pattern, at least for me over the years, where it's like tools are a thing, but deployment and like understanding where a player is truly really, really, really strong and just sticking them there is almost more important. But I'm curious as to what your read on it is, because I'm watching these guys, I'm looking at this list and I'm going, well, it's not necessarily that I think back and I go, man, I William Valinder, for example, or Yoni Yermo or whatever, like those guys, the tools were great. It's just putting it all together just never happened. But then you look down the list and, you know, Emil Andre is playing in the NHL now, and Braden Schneider is playing in the NHL now, and Brock Faber, like that one is also very interesting. So I'm curious as to how you kind of come down at this point in the process. For me, I mean, this was very early. This was the first year I tracked data on a large swath of the data of the draft class. But what kind of like patterns can you kind of pick through of like what's kind of worked and what hasn't in the time since that you've learned?
I think the biggest thing with looking back on this 2020 draft class is you have guys that I think I had a lot of faith in a guy like Askarov. I had him at 11th overall. Rodion Amirov, RIP, like we never got to see what was going to happen with him. So he's obviously an outlier when you look at rankings. But then, like you said, there are guys like Dawson Mercer and Jack Quinn, who I think the biggest thing with their games is, especially Jack Quinn, he doubled down on what he was good at, and he didn't really care about what he wasn't good at.
Right.
And I think the Buffalo Sabres, when they drafted him as high as they did, they went, we're drafting him, we're accepting him for what he is, and we're allowing him to be that. And through all these other high picks that Buffalo's had, he's kind of just fallen into a great situation where he's able to just do what he is good at, and they're not asking him to do a whole lot more. Like, the one thing I've noticed the most about Jack Quinn watching these playoffs as much as I have is I don't know if there's a player in the NHL that loves to shoot the puck more. Like, if this guy got top line like minutes, he would lead the NHL in shots by a mile. Like, this is like Ovechkin mid-career levels of shot totals. Like, but he's not got that elite finishing. He just has a knack for doing it at times. So I think he's a volume shooter who's just kind of building on that. Like, he's allowing his teammates to fill in those holes around him. And I think the thing with him in this draft class as a whole is there are so many guys that I don't think this is going to work at the next level. and I'm just not like, I just don't have faith in it. And for a lot of guys, like it's worked out, in ways that I think I bet on those tools, and I bet on a lot of the upside in this draft class and in this kind of era of me scouting. And I went, the guy that is playing the guy that is playing a second line role or a third line role in the CHL. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that at the NHL level. And
Yeah.
there are guys from this draft class, I think, more than any, that have figured that out. And I think that's the really interesting part, is they've just kind of figured out how to continue playing their role.
Yeah.
Like I look at a Braden Schneider, like I didn't really love him in his draft year, but like he's playing NHL minutes. He's been playing NHL minutes for a while. Like Dylan Holloway is a guy that I had in the early 20s, and I'm like, if he hits, he's going to hit great, and he's been fantastic for the Blues now. Like, and a big thing with him was getting that opportunity after leaving Edmonton. So it's a really interesting draft class to look back on, because I think one thing I really did fall victim to, and like you said, this was your first year tracking data. This was my first year really, I think, doing the in-depth work. The year before, I released a ranking, and Mort Sider is always the guy I go back to with that one, because I had him at 6, I think, on my ranking. I absolutely loved him in his draft year in 2019. And I had someone who I won't name that's still very publicly out there in the draft world. I told you this story, you know who it is. And they told me I'm an idiot, and if I wanted anyone to take me seriously, I had to drop a guy like that in my rankings. And then he ends up going in the top 10, and I listened to them because it was my first year really doing it, my first year getting any sort of like, attention isn't the right word, but like people were like, oh, this guy might know a little bit what he's doing. And then I caved. And I think that was a lesson in that draft class. And then in this 2020, where I'm like, sometimes you got to just go with what you believe in, and you can't cave to someone that you respect in the industry going, I think you're an idiot if you do that. And sometimes you got to just accept being an idiot.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is, I mean, I'm looking at this list and looking at the guys that I didn't have ranked that are actually playing in the NHL. And like a lot of them, the common thread seems to be guys where physicality was what they led with. So like I remember writing off Tyler Clevin and Luke Tuck. Those are the most notable ones. Will Cully is another one that I remember. Alex Nikishin, all these guys I kind of wrote off because I just saw their physical game and I thought, well, I just don't see it as a super desirable trait in the draft. And I think for me, the lesson is that actually is a very desirable trait to a point. Like I had Caden Gooley just outside the first round, and that's one where I feel like I really am kicking myself for that, because that's a player that even at the time I remember being like, this defensive player is so good at what he does so well. And I think that's kind of the common thread for both of us here is like, there are players who exist that do a thing very well that does need to be a thing in the NHL, right? In order to work in the NHL, it needs to be a thing, and that's the thing you can lean into, right? And Gooley had it, Tuck had it. Well, not Luke Tuck. He hasn't played in the NHL, I don't think. But like Will Cully is one who has it. Yeah. You know, all these guys. And I think about a guy at the top end of the draft, like an Alexander Holtz. And I think that Holtz and I think this is going to be a pattern. Holtz and Perreault are the two for sure that showed the red flag to me of offensive scoring guys who score a lot of goals but don't do it from scoring areas. And that's the Brendan Brisson was another one. Guys who scored a lot of goals and did not do so from areas where you score goals in the NHL. That to me is a very, very difficult hill to climb. And I think that's something that you're going to see as a bit of a pattern. And I think for me, at least, like that is part of, you know, where things sort of come from. And I'm looking at a William Verlinder at 20 and I go, the tools were great with him. And I really loved him. And he went like just outside the first round, I believe. But it just I remember watching him going, yeah, but he just needs to develop physically so much. And the defensive game was such a huge gap. And drafting defensemen where you're sitting there going, boy, they're such great skaters in all of this, but the defensive moments, there's a lot of really sketchy moments there. That's where you also find a pattern, I think, where you can go, yeah, that's a really tough hill to climb, is those defensive guys with all the great tools, but it just, the actual defensive part is just not quite there. Whereas a guy like Gooley, that job is there. You can tell him to do that job and he will do it. And I think a lot of the guys that I didn't have ranked kind of scratch that same itch of like, they have a thing, and they do, and they certainly do it. So it's really interesting looking back at this class. I mean, it's also very interesting too, because I feel like it opened up, even with retrospect and even with the benefit of hindsight, it opened up really fast. And I'm looking at the top 11 guys, and I mean, the only egregious one that I probably would have bumped up a little bit is Jarvis over Huznadinov, but like, I mean, that's one spot, and Huznadinov behind Sanderson. But Sanderson was my second defenseman. And I remember the debate of Drysdale versus Sanderson, and Sanderson is, again, the same thing. His defensive game was so strong, especially in that second half. And Drysdale, I was always very curious about that part of his game developing further. So, you know, it's like, identify the job a player can do and how well they can do that job. That's been something that I've really tried to hone in on over the years. And also, one more thing before we go to 2021, for me at least, and I'll throw it back to you after, but I think the lesson too for me here is, I don't think there's anything wrong with believing in skill, but you have to see absolute evidence that skill can also be hard. Like, if you see guys who are extremely skilled, like I have Jean-Luc Foudy in here, Alexander Pashin, Jan Mishak, Ozzy Weisblatt even, who has found his way into the NHL, but all these guys, it's like they had all of this skill and so much upside. Hendrix Lapierre is another one, but it just never really coalesced. Whereas you see a guy like Emil Heinemann doing really well in the NHL. And I had him at 35, right? Like I liked Heinemann, but you see these guys where they're very, very skilled and there's lots of potential, but it just never coalesced because escaping pressure and dealing with it and doing so against much bigger players is just something that I never saw out of them. Whereas, you know, at that point, it's like, if you have doubts about that, then go for a guy like Gouli, go for a guy like Schneider, go for a guy, you know, like Matt Rempe even. Like Matt Rempe has played more NHL games than like Jean-Luc Foudy, right? Which, or insert any number of really good players from that era that just haven't cracked. And so it's interesting. I still believe in Ronnie Hirvonen. I will say that. I still believe there's something there, but I don't know. I'll throw it back to you and then we can move to 2021 if you want.
The final thing I'll say about this 2020 class is, looking back in hindsight now, like, I agree with everything you're saying, that we're looking at guys, and like I look up and down this list and I see like there's these highly skilled guys where there's a guy like Topi Niemela, right? Like, how much faith did we have in a guy like that at that time? But I also look and I go, you and I were both among the higher people on Marco Rossi. I was among the higher people on Anton Lundell that year. And those are two guys that use that physicality, use that skill, use that hard skill to play the games that they played. Marco Rossi, I think the thing we all talked about was like, yes, he's small, but the way he plays along the boards and the way he plays in those dirty areas is so high end that it eliminates the fact that he's small. And we're still starting to see that in the NHL level. Like, we're seeing glimpses of it and everything. But like, it was almost like we realized that at that time. Right. At least it feels like, looking back, like I look back and I see certain guys and I'm like, I realized that with certain guys. Like Connor Zary is a guy that I had at 16. And I'm like, in looking back, I'm like, I feel like I would have normally had him lower. Right. But I saw the trends, like you said, the ability to play a role at the NHL level. And it's like seeing it and then going, but also Casper Simon Tyville. Like, that's my guy.
Those the Simon Tyvall wars were quite something. But all right, so we can move on to 2021 and get going here. 2021 was I felt. I've been talking a lot, so I'll let you take this one off the top. But I feel personally like a lot more comfortable about my 2021 list, especially because I think in 2021, like, a lot of people kind of threw their hands in the air because of the pandemic and went, I don't know. And I went, well, I don't think that's very acceptable. There's risk, but that's, you know, let's call a spade and get to work. And there's only one player, I think, honestly, in all honesty, I think there's only one player that slipped through my fingers that I'm kicking myself over, and I'm sure everybody watching knows who it is in 2021, and every NHL team probably feels the same way. But what about, I'll throw it to you. Let's start us off with what you've got to bring to the table.
I think looking back at 2021, it was the first year that I really just went, I don't care how consensus looks. Like, I just don't agree, like in any way, shape, or form. Like, Owen Power, and we're seeing it these playoffs, is a 6'5" defenseman who plays like he's 5'10". And that's awesome because he can move the puck, he can do some fun things. But like, the thing was, this is the next Victor Hedman. Like, this is the guy. And every time I watched him at Michigan, I went, no, he's not. You're crazy. You have not watched him. See, like, I had Matty Beniers 1, Eklund 2. My crazy ass had Jesper Wallstedt at 3.
Same, man.
Like,
that's the same 1, 2, 3 as I did.
Then you start getting into some of the different names. I had Brant Clark, Fabian Lysell, who I keep faith that he is going to be a very good NHLer. It's just taking longer. And I know AJ would respect that.
Right.
Luke Hughes, Mason McTavish. I had Atu Ratu in the top 10 still, and then Simon Edmondson. Like, Kent Johnson, Dylan Genther. Like, my top 12, for the most part, has gotten into the NHL and played games. Fabian Lysell is kind of the exception there.
Yeah.
And then it starts going a little bit differently. But like, seeing guys like Fyodor Svechkov up high, Cole Sillinger was pretty high. He's been in the NHL since he was 18.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Logan Stankoven. Like, I had Sebastian Cossa much lower than a lot of people. I had Billy Koivunen in the first round.
Right.
Like, it's an interesting draft class because it really felt like the first one where, like you said, everyone threw their hands in the air. And then allowed people like you and I who were like, well, yeah, like, we can't get to the rinks, but like, video still exists.
Right.
And it allowed us to kind of almost assert ourselves within the greater like atmosphere and greater environment of the draft world.
Right.
I think this was the first year that, like, at least for me, it felt like I was starting to be placed in those conversations with some of those other people that do have a little bit of a higher standing because they work for some of the big organizations and whatnot. So, yeah, it's an interesting year because, like, Owen Power was the number 1 guy on everyone's list, and I had him at 6, and it doesn't look crazy now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I mean, I'm really happy with my first half of the first round, regardless of you know, picking and choosing of like, well, this guy's better than this guy or this guy's better than this guy. Like, the only miss I'd say really high on my list, and I know this for a fact in retrospect, but I really, really loved Simone Robertson that year, and he was a 3rd round pick of St. Louis.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was putting together the video on him, and it's a practice that it started something that I've been doing every year since, which is if I'm doing a video on a player, I am really paying attention to, I go into the folder and I'm really sort of trying to go in with a blank slate and going, all right, I have this guy ranked at spot X. I am just going to watch him sort of unbiased, and I'm just going to go, what do I believe? And at the time, I remember watching Robertson and going, I think I might have this guy too high. I think I might be missing something here. I'm watching these clips back and I just am not sure about this. And I didn't really buckle. I just kind of went, like, I've done all this work and, like, you know, and I trusted my gut before that and just went, you know what, maybe it'll all work out. And I do think he has been, you know, he didn't play at all for his pro team in Sweden for a number of years. And that, I think, always is a harmful thing for a player. And I still feel like, you know, when he was in Sweden, there was potential for something more. But when you see guys like Racine, for me at least, and Coronado especially, right behind him, those two I should have seen in advance, especially Racine. And the other one definitely, you know, like, I mean, I had Scott Morrow well into my first round. And that one, yeah, you know, like, that's an interesting one. But I think the interesting things about 2021 was, one, the resurgence, or the surgence, I should say, of Wyatt Johnston. That one, yes. I don't think a single person really saw that one coming. I would look at my ranking tracker, but I'm worried of the state that this spreadsheet is in. So I'm gonna leave it for now. But I mean, he barely played, so it's really hard to know. But I don't know. It was an interesting year. I think there's a lot of guys here where I still feel like if you roll the dice, it could come up a completely different way and things could work really well. Like I'm thinking Ayrton Martino. Like I think that guy has had and has all the tools in the world. It's been 4 years of college, and all of that stuff. Dylan Duke, I think Dylan Duke could still grind. I'm surprised he hasn't ground his way into the NHL for Tampa Bay yet, on a consistent basis, I should say, because whenever I see him with Syracuse, I think he's just a tremendous amount of fun. And I think I'm just looking at this list and Matthew Nyes is the other one. Matthew Nyes, I remember at the time, it was a matter of what I was told. What I found out afterwards was he was fighting injuries and sickness and mono all year long, and that made everything a lot more difficult to. Oh my God, remember the Dario Sidler era? I remember that guy. Holy smokes, Dario Sidler
Nation,
literally the last guy on my list. That's funny. Oh my God, there's so many names here where I just go. Oh, and the other one is Giannis Moser. Giannis Moser, I should have. And I remember watching him. My whole thing was, and I think I said this when he was drafted. I think you can find this on the Draftathon where it's like Giannis Moser gets drafted, and I go, don't be shocked to see this guy in the NHL before almost anybody in this draft. Just because I remember he was so mobile and just so smart moving the puck. And my whole thing was like, you never know drafting a 21-year-old, right? But I think now you can sort of go, yeah, but I remember watching him and it's like, would you sign this guy? Like if he goes undrafted, are you sending him a contract day one? And my answer to that would probably be yes. And it's like, well, then you draft him, right? Like, are you going to take him? Are you going to take him or like Jack Peart? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't mind Jack Peart, but like considering what he was doing in Switzerland, that should have been an easy call. But beyond that, I mean, I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot that I can really look at this list and go, wow, I really bungled that one. There's just some where I'm like, I didn't lean into it quite enough, right? Like Stankoven, I remember desperately wanting to put him as high as 9. Like I had Brant Clark, Dylan Gunther. I liked him more than McTavish, but I thought McTavish would work out better as an NHL player in more roles. But I definitely would have put him ahead of Ratu and Svechkov based on what I saw of those two guys. And I didn't feel the conviction to believe in a guy that small based on how he played, but here we are. And look at him go in the playoffs. He's been amazing. But in terms of I still love watching Matty Beniers do his thing in Seattle. I think if Seattle can get him a guy who can bury the puck for him, I think Beniers could have a big season at some point. I mean, he's a Calder Trophy winner. Eklund, similar story. But luckily for me with Liesel is also another one where I think I learned a lot, especially right after he was drafted and fell in the draft. I had people telling me but he's a really good example of how off ice really does matter, and how a super talented player is still a human being and is capable of some things that can be really difficult to overcome as a person, as a human being. And I mean, I'm purposefully being a little bit elusive, but he had some things coming with him when you drafted him. And Boston, I remember when he got drafted, Boston kind of gave him a talk and was like, look, man, you're coming into town with X on your plate and it's up to you and all this stuff. And as far as I know, it's been, he's been a very good AHL player for them. And I feel like he's deserved a shot in the NHL, but maybe that's something that comes next year, because I still feel like he belongs there. But luckily for me, he went one slot after Wallstedt, and for a long time in that first round, my best player available was Wallstedt. Wallstedt. And honestly, as much as I love Stankoven, I'm very happy that Wallstedt has finally found his legs and become that sort of super high-end NHL goaltender for Minnesota, because that would have been the guy where I would have been pushing for him pretty hard. But other than that, I feel like 2021, especially considering the difficulties of scouting that year, I can't be too picky. Someone in the chat mentioned Jackson Blake, and that's another one. I mean, nobody expected Jackson Blake to grow as much as he did. Not physically, but I mean on the ice. This is also our first appearance of Yuri Tahacek on the list. That's another one that's it's a first year of him. First year of Dmitry Kuzmin. Remember him? That was a time. The lacrosse scoring defenseman,
defender. Yeah,
the lacrosse goal defenseman.
I witnessed one live in the in the OHL.
That's sick, man. That's
this kid's. He was unreal. He was so fun to watch, and not an NHL player.
Yeah, so much fun to watch though. But by and large, I mean, in 2021 also, you can't really look back and be like, wow, look at all the incredible NHL players that have come out of it, at least not so far. I mean, Nyes has been amazing with Toronto, Wyatt Johnston, Jackson Blake. I don't know if I had Jackson Blake ranked. I don't remember. I did. Yes, I did, in the third round. So I had him ranked higher than where he went. So I'll take that as a pat on the back. But it was an interesting year, and I think we all are also looking at a similar kind of year this year. Like I think we're sitting on a class where there's a lot of really good players. Like you look at this entire almost top 20 picks, and or at least top 20 on my list, and they're all pretty darn good. And when you look at where the NHL went, there were some mistakes made. You got Chase Stillman at 29, and the Logan Mailloux, Nolan Allen debacle from that year, and all that stuff. Tyler Boucher. But it still turned out to be a very intriguing group. Who knows what's going to happen with Sebastian Cossa? But I don't know. I'll throw it back to you for 2021 before we move on. But the main thing I think I learned from this was, like you said, kind of have a little bit of conviction. Like there were players I had I remember really not liking Corson Ceulemans, and I still had him at 34. Same thing with like a Brennan Othman. I had those guys in the top 40, and I remember going like, I don't know about these guys. But then when I look lower on my list, I go, but who am I putting ahead of them? And I don't have good answers if I'm being honest with myself. Yeah, but even at the time, right? Like you can't. It's hard. It's hard, right?
No, it's such it really is an interesting draft class, because I look back and, like you said, like it really was the year. Like have some conviction, like rank the guys that you actually believe in, and for the most part, it really did work out well for me this year. There's a few guys, like I had Ayrton Martino in the first round, Scott Morrow in the first round, and they haven't gotten there fully yet. Especially like Martino's been in college, but like I still have faith in some of those guys. But like then like you said, like this, looking back at this draft class, man, there is some names like Zach Bolduc was in this draft class. Like remember Bobby Orr 2.0?
Hell yeah, I do. I had people. I remember having people. This is another thing. I had people in my ear about him all year long about how much of a bull he is, how much of a gym rat, and all this stuff. And I went, okay. All right. And I think over the years, I've kind of learned to plug my ears, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And then, like you said, like the Tyler Boucher, like people talking super highly about him. He was barely on my list. And same thing with Nolan Allen, like barely on my list. And then, like you said, there are a few guys who probably should have gotten a little bit more love, like the Matthew Nyes, Wyatt Johnston. Like Wyatt Johnston, like he was technically drafted off the Windsor Spitfires, who I see all the time.
Yep.
Guess who I didn't see that year? The Windsor Spitfires, because the OHL was shut down. This guy played third line minutes for Team Canada at the under 18s. In Dallas, goes and drafts him in the first round, and everyone was like, "That's crazy." And he's probably maybe one of the best player in this draft. Like, it's such a weird year, but I do feel the need to bring up a few names that I know will touch your heart and touch my heart, because they're all timers.
Try me.
First off, for our good boy Samuel McGilligan, Marcus Almquist.
Oh yeah,
was a guy in this draft.
Danish
class.
league superstar though, man.
And man, oh man, was he fun to watch at times. And I remember. I don't know. Don't quote me on this. We can talk to Sam one day about this. But I want to say at one point, Sam had this guy in like the edge of the first round. Like he loved Marcus Almquist.
Same though, man. I'm the same way.
Like the guy was so fun and so little. Braden Kressler was a guy. I remember how much I loved Ruben Rafkin. and then he just never developed anywhere.
Wow, Ruben
I
Rafkin.
loved Ruben Rafkin.
Wow. Holy man.
There were so many guys in this draft class. Like the start of your favorite player becoming an NHLer, Josh Waugh. This was the Josh Waugh year.
It was the
Where
Joshua Waugh year.
Will Scouch was a big guy. I think were you the person that was a big Oscar Plandowski guy?
No, I was not.
Okay.
I was absolutely not. No.
I remember that there were people that were so high on him, and I just kept going, I think you were legitimately intoxicated.
Yeah.
Like, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Kyle Masters, Cole Jordan, like there's so many guys that I was like, maybe Ryan Ufko. Like this really is a year to look back on and go, dang, that Oliver Kapanen was in this draft.
I was literally about to bring his name up. Like those are two guys, Oliver Kapanen and Samuel Hellenius. They I think those two are extremely good development cases. Like, This is the thing about doing this. It's like you can only do so much, and like you may come down with a good read on a player, but you don't know, right? Like you don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. And like I remember watching Oliver Kapanen and going, wow, this guy's really smart. He moves the puck really well. He's such a good, like, centralized part of his junior team in Finland, but there was so little evidence of anything beyond just being a really smart player. But Montreal clearly puts a lot of work into developing their young players and really, just really pushing their guys to like diversify their game and sort of also just stick to what works for them. And Kapanen, I mean, he's scratched in the playoffs right now, but he's been on this team for a while, and I don't think he looks too out of place on the Habs from what I've seen this year.
He's a 20 goal scorer as a rookie.
Yeah. I mean, playing with Demidov will do that. But but at the same time, I think though, the other thing too in this draft also that I learned too is, I mean, I had 100 guys ranked, and I think another thing I learned too is like you got to set your bar a little higher. Like I had some guys ranked on here where I'm like, I don't know, some other people like them, or but I'm not. They don't excite me enough where I'm ever going to draft them. Like that's become my bar. Is like, would I ever consider drafting this player? And a lot of the time, the answer to that is no.
Sean Chabril.
Yeah, exactly. Like and it's also like I still think back to how much fun I had watching some of these guys, like for example, like Jake Martin. I mean, Jake Martin completely flamed out, but that guy, man, he was good. And I don't know what happened to him. I haven't heard anything about him, but as a defensive defenseman on the NTDP that year, I thought for sure, like if we were looking at Brock Faber the previous year and he immediately turned a corner and became something, I was watching Jake Martin going like, I think there could be a similar thing there. Just the rock solid defensive ability projecting to higher levels. And I thought he always looked solid in NCAA, but he never played. And I don't know what happened there. But that's another what if where it's like, I don't know. And then there's also guys where they just caught lightning in a bottle. To me, Brent Johnson, that's the one that comes to mind, is that guy. Yeah. I really loved him, but I don't know. Again, I watched him at college and I just thought he was still good, but it just hasn't come together. And I'm not exactly sure why, but he also was driving some unbelievable numbers in my work that year. And it might just have been just a career season happening when you're 17, but very strange with some of these guys, but an interesting year nonetheless. I don't know if you want to put anything up.
Yeah. The one last guy I do want to bring up, because I don't remember where you were on him at all, but I remember being so much lower than consensus. I had him at 48. Sasha Pastujov.
Yeah. I had him at 47.
So many people had him like so high.
Yeah.
And that was one of the guys where, like, we talked about learning lessons from the previous year.
Yes.
And understanding that like pace is king at the NHL level. And there are guys that can play a lower pace game and have success, but it's usually guys that are like elite level smart, elite level skill, and then have an elite trait like passing or something like that. And listen, Sasha Pastujov was awesome when he was standing still, but there were so many moments in a hockey game where you're not standing still.
Yeah.
And I think he was a guy that I look back on and I go, yeah, like I kind of nailed that one, because man, it's a tough one when you're so skilled like that, but you're like mobility is limited. Like Brett Harrison was another guy that a lot of people had high, and I had him well out of the first round.
Yeah.
it's an interesting class because I think I look back on this one and I feel really good about it for the most part.
Generally, yes. I mean, in terms of like my gut being something I didn't trust beyond like past a certain point, I don't think there are too many guys. Maybe Colton Dock was one where I thought, yeah, like the basics of his game are pretty good and
Yeah.
there's something there, but I didn't see an NHL player there really at the time, at least not like a solid bottom six one. But there was one more thing, and then I forgot what it was before we move on. I'll probably remember tomorrow when I wake up in the morning. All right. Yeah, let's go to 2022. Let's go to 2022 and see what this looks like. So, all right. 2022, immediately for me, I did not trust my gut. It was the fool me once with Lafreniere in 2020, fool me twice with Shane Wright and Logan Cooley. I as honest as I'm trying to be with myself, I still probably would have like Lambert Slavkovsky 3-4, but Cooley 1 I should have done. And I knew it as I hit submit on my final ranking that year. I knew it. And that one, 2022 for me is a bit more of an adventure. I think I leaned into things very heavily. And in retrospect, what I've learned is you can't really trust when you stick Russians in Russia for a long time all the time. That's a lesson that I've learned. And let's see who else. I mean, it's also still more of the same. Like I had Jimmy Snuggerud at 33, and that's a guy where you just give him the puck and he can just go and rip it, and he can make it work. I don't know how a guy like Snuggerud has made it work based on his play style, and a guy like Alexander Holtz hasn't. And that would be an interesting experiment to look into. But I don't know. Like, what are the first appearance of Kenta Izagai, by the way. But where are you starting with this class? Because I thought it was a pretty fun one to watch, but I feel not so good about quite a few of my takes at the time.
Yeah, like I'm looking back, and this is a rough class. I had the same thing though. I had Logan Cooley and Shane Wright at number 1 and 2, and I have them in the same tier. Like they're both literally in the tier 1. And
I did as well with Lambert.
Like I loved Logan Cooley's game. I still love Logan Cooley's game. I still to this day think that Shane Wright's development was also hampered a little bit.
Sure.
You look at some of the things that have happened to Shane Wright over his career, and some of the developmental choices by Seattle were a little questionable. Like his draft plus 1 year, he was bounced around. He played like for 4 different teams that year. Like it was a weird year. But nonetheless, like he hasn't really figured it out yet. And there's still time. Like this is, at the end of the day, this is the 2022 draft. Like we're 4 years now from that draft class. We should start seeing these guys figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you mentioned, like listen here, this looking at this list makes me really question if I know how to look at a defenseman and judge him, because I had David Jiricek really high.
Well, yeah, and that's another one where I did not trust my gut on that, because I remember watching Jiricek and going, I don't know, I think this guy is quite a bit further away than people think, and I absolutely feel like he's a case where the development is a factor. Like, I know that's an easy thing to hand wave and just say, oh, development is a problem, but that guy, in my opinion, should not have touched North American professional hockey ice for at least another year or two, and they just shoved him right in. And like, I don't think the environment was as supportive as a Slavkovsky environment in Montreal. Yeah. I think those two different trajectories, I think that's a very good. I think Montreal, that the pattern I'm seeing is that Montreal is a really, really good case study in how to actually develop a young core of players and stay patient with them and help them make baby steps and fight through the noise. Because there was a time where Slavkovsky, everybody was freaking the hell out about what he looked like in the NHL. But
Yeah.
And yes, I would agree it was too much too soon. I would never have done it, and I still wouldn't have done it. But Montreal is a very interesting place to play nowadays in the NHL, where you do get that leeway, you do get that runway a lot of the time, and that Martin St. Louis will help find a job that makes sense for you and help you thrive in that role. Whereas at David Jiricek, I just feel like they expected him to be something right away that he wasn't. And he had a pretty good AHL run there for a while, but it just was not, he wasn't there yet. And I feel like once things kind of got out of control in Columbus, it's really hard to get that back. And that's one at the time too. I remember watching him and just losing a ton of physical battles and having pucks bleed through him all the time. And I thought, okay, he's just playing pro hockey. Maybe that's just a learning curve thing. I don't know. But then he went straight into the AHL, and I went, oh, okay, I don't know about that. But I remember what I was going to say about 2021. It was also my first experience. It was a fascinating year because you got to see what players looked like playing way outside of their normal area. Like Carson Lambos going to Finland and seeing what he looked like in the Finnish Junior League. And Brett Harrison went to the Junior League in Finland as well. And I remember watching those guys and going, they do not look like they're at the same level as a lot of the guys they're on the ice with. And it kind of, it planted that seed in my mind of like, well, maybe these Canadian kids are kind of being a little more overrated than I think they are. And that maybe there's a little bit of
Europe's undervalued.
Maybe there's this whole Europe thing that like, if you just lean into the value overseas a little bit more, cause I remember watching Carson Lambos in Liga and going like, this guy is not ready for this at all. Like not even close. And he just still has not come around. And he's one of these like guys who is talked about as a jack of all trades defenseman. And I just didn't see that. And I don't know. It was very, very interesting to see that. But back into 2022, there are still guys here, though, that I still believe in, right? Like, I still think Vladimir Grudinin, he's playing 20 minutes a night in the KHL. Yeah. And when I watch him over there, he looks pretty darn good. And I think Carolina wants to bring him over.
Yes, as far as I know, I think that's the plan for the summer.
As far as I know, they're bringing him over. But like the other thing too, and I still believe this is true, especially in retrospect, my third tier goes from 7 to 27, right?
Yeah.
Like 26, sorry, 7 to 26. I did not know how to make heads or tails out of any of these guys. Like Cutter Gauthier, I had at 23, but seeing him go as high as he did was, I think, a little bit high. But I remember thinking, like, if you really believe in him, if you really believe in his size and the skill level and the shot, then I guess you could see how he might be able to take the necessary steps. But like, I don't know. At the same time, I also see like Lane Hudson in my first round and feeling pretty decent about that, I would say. If anything, I had him significantly too low. But I remember at the time being like, I think I have him about as high as I could realistically expect, right? Like I saw guys like Kasper ahead of him, and Yuri Kulich was so good in the Czech league that year. I don't know. Where are you thinking with this? I mean, I had Philip Machar at 13, and that one I feel a little silly about, but that's another one where it's like, he's just not quite enough. If you watch him in the AHL, I find that it's just not quite enough to crack an NHL roster to be in the role that he needs to be in. And it's unfortunate when that happens. And I still don't know where that line is. I don't know how to judge that properly. And it's very, very weird. But that's one where I go, it wasn't about the fundamentals with him, but it's just like he plays a style where there needs to be a lot there. And I think he just tragically falls a little short. But I don't know. Where are you at?
I think the one thing I'm noticing right now as I look through this list is I remember that year saying it's a bad year for defensemen. Like, don't draft a defenseman if you can. And there were so many people that had defensemen high on their lists because everyone's going to draft a defenseman high. That's how it works. I had 3 defensemen in my top 20. 4. It was Vladimir Grudinin was at 19. And then I had Korchinski, Nemec, and Jiricek in the top 20. But outside of that, like, I feel pretty good about most of the defensemen I have down that list outside of Lane Hudson. Lane Hudson, like you said, it's a guy that I think reasonably at the time, like, Should I have probably been more aggressive? 100%. Like in hindsight, I remember loving Lane Hudson, but like a 5'8" defenseman is hard to like push for. And we're seeing that he's the exception to the rule, but that rule still exists in reality. So I don't feel entirely too bad, as much as I hate myself for not having him higher.
Well, there were teams that skipped over him 3 times, right? So
yeah, that's what I mean, right? Like,
like,
it's not
you're
crazy
not those.
to have that. But like I had Sam Renzel as one of my top defensemen in the draft class, and he at 20, and he's a really solid guy for the Chicago Blackhawks. Like Denton Matejchuk was a guy that was super questionable.
Yeah,
I watch him in the NHL, and I still think he's super questionable.
I would say the same thing.
But like, there are not many defensemen in this draft class that have made the NHL and really impacted the game in a big way. Like Pavel Minchkov made it quick in Anaheim, and he's in and out of the lineup at times.
Yeah.
Like Simon Nemec, David Juracek have struggled to get in the lineup. Kevin Korchinski had a rookie season and then disappeared. Like, this is not a draft for defensemen. And you look up and down the list, and it's like, yeah, like I don't like, you know who I missed out on? Elias Pettersson, who I had at 100.
Yeah, but like he's like a second pair guy on the worst team in the league, right? Like,
fair enough, right?
You know
who else was on this list once again? Yuri Tiacek.
Well, yes,
Jake
that makes
Martin.
Sense. Yeah. I mean,
but like, it's a weird draft. Like, it was very weak on defensemen, and I think if you look back at a lot of people's rankings, they have a lot of defensemen high. But like, the one guy I want to bring up is Frank Nazar.
Oh yeah,
I loved this guy.
Where did he actually go? Was it? I know he went to Chicago, obviously,
14 or 12 or 14 to Chicago. I had him at 6, and I had him as high as 3 at one point.
Hell yeah, brother.
He was the guy that I fell in love with in this draft class. I love this kid's game. I still think he's got so much potential at the NHL level. Like, I love this kid's game. Deserved it. Brad Lambert, I still have faith that he's gonna eventually pop on his second team. It's gonna be great.
I think I still believe there.
But like you said, like, this was also the year where like Gleb Trikazov was quite high on my list.
I was gonna bring that up. I know that's the elephant in the room. I am the Wolverine meme with him, where Wolverine's in bed caressing the photo, because I have gone back. I can't tell. I've maybe 4 or 5 times over the course of this season, because I just feel so insane watching him in the AHL this year. I don't think he's necessarily been poor there, but he's not playing. And I look at Trikazov, and I go into my folder of my files from him when he was a draft eligible, and I still just watch those back, and I go, this kid had everything going for him. There was so much there to go off of. And I just could not believe how much upside there was in his game. And over the years, I think he has, I mean, I hesitate to say put on a lot of weight, but he certainly plays like it. He is slower. The skill is gone. The shot is still there. He's still a hell of a shooter. But I look at Trikazov, and I'm just like, again, I mean, I know that what happened a little bit was he was on a bad pro team the year after he was drafted, and they asked him to do everything offensively, and he just couldn't do it that fast. Barely 18 years old. Like, it was just not a good situation for him. And then when things didn't go well, he would get benched or sent to the junior league again, where he would just shred everybody all over again. And then I think he put on some weight at that point and became a bit more like of a boulder on skates a little bit, but that is not the style of player he is. And he's still, I think, recovering from that. And I know I spoke to some people in Carolina, like over the summer, I think this past summer or the one before, and they still do believe that there's an NHL player there, and it's going to take some time, but there's a lot of stuff to unwrap and deal with there. But again, like, this is the difficult part. Like, you don't know what's going to happen after they're picked. And I still stand by the fact that he was a first rounder at the very least in that class, and had all the potential in the world to be, I think, a top end scorer. It just the wheels fell off real fast. And I remember watching him in the KHL going, who is this guy? This is not the same player whatsoever. And so this is the tricky bit, because it's like, you know, I saw someone say like having Gauthier that low is like a joke. And it's like, Well, yeah, but like that's easy to say now, but Cutter Gauthier at the time was a volume shooter. All he did was just grab the puck, go into the offensive zone, and shoot from the boards. You know who else did that? Jacob Perreault. You know who else did that? Alexander Holtz. All these other guys where it just didn't work, but the pathway, Joachim Kamel, the pathway was just different for him. And maybe there was a part of it that was sort of the off-ice impact type of thing. And like that, we don't have insight into. We're not capable of having the resources an NHL team does. So this is the tricky bit, right? Like I think you can take away some things, at least I can. I feel like I'm as the years go on, there's less I'm taking away where I'm like, wow, what a glaring, terrible error that was. And I'm seeing a lot of logic behind where teams took a lot of these guys, except maybe Lane Hudson. But by and large, yeah, like, I don't know. It's getting, I can see myself getting to the point where it's like, all right, I can kind of trust where my head is at on a lot of these guys. And in retrospect, I might tweak things here and there, but based on what I've watched of them over the years, like, again, it's always the guys where I didn't lean into my gut enough, right? Like Kamel, you mentioned him. I did not really like Kamel, and I was not at all surprised to see him almost get to 20, right? Like I really thought that guys like Nazer, Ogren, Casey, who else? Osland, all excited me a lot more. And I just didn't really lean into it because, again, like there was this narrative out there that there was something I was missing. And I think I've learned too, like, I'd rather just stick my neck out and see what I was missing than do what other people expect. And this is one other thing, and then I'll throw it back to you. One other thing, the value of a player's draft -1. That's something that I also look into. Like, I remember I had at the beginning of the year, I had Elias Salomonson top 5 at the beginning of the year. I remember that distinctly. And he had a year where, from my perspective, I think what happened was they taught him how to play defense, and they did not let him flex his offensive abilities, which were there at 16. And I thought, this guy's broken. Where in reality, it wasn't that he was broken. It was just, he was diversifying his game and he was learning some things. And that's a guy where I think I at the time, I don't know how much higher I would have put him, but definitely in retrospect, it's the value of, like, when you see a guy when he's 16, you kind of have to keep it in the back of your mind of like just how impressive that player was, and dig in a little more as to like what might be going on with, where their game is right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. And I think that's something that even today, I think sometimes we still struggle with. And I think, like, we'll get into Gavin McKenna later, I'm sure, but like that's the thing that I am like wrestling with as well with him. But to stay on this draft class, the 2022 class, I also want to, like, one of the things I've been doing as we go through these lists is I'm looking, because this year I'm getting a lot of flack for some of the guys I have much lower on my list than consensus.
Join the club. Yes, join the club.
It's something that you and I feel like regularly get, because we have, whether it's the same guy or different guys, we have guys lower on our list than consensus, and we get a little bit of crap for it. So I want to look at a couple guys that I had much lower on my list than consensus, and I got a lot of crap for that year. And one of those guys is Connor Geekie. I had him down at 27. He got drafted much higher than that, and also fetched a massive haul in the process for the rights to draft him. And he is an NHL player at times for the Tampa Bay Lightning now, but there are very clearly still some issues with his game. One of the other guys is Rutger McGroarty. I think I had him.
Oh yeah, I forgot he was this year.
I had him at 37. And I wanted to have him lower, if I'm not mistaken. I at one point had him lower.
Yeah, I had 47.
I kind of caved a little bit. And you know what? I don't completely hate the fact that I had him outside the first round. But the one guy I want to really talk about is Marco Kasper.
True.
The guy that rose at the end of the season. I didn't quite understand it. And it was, well, this guy's a center and he's going to be a center at the NHL level. And like, he's so responsible and he's smart and he's this and he's that. And when he's a third liner.
Yeah. It was
And
pretty clear at the time.
I'm like, he's a third liner. Like,
Yeah.
I have no doubt. Like, I don't doubt the
He'll
things that
play.
you're saying.
He's gonna do it.
But like, he doesn't have the upside of most of the guys I have ahead of him.
Yeah. And a good
No,
one.
you're an
like
idiot.
like a good third one. Like
Yeah, he's not a
that's
bad
not a
third liner.
negative. Like that's just
With that,
saying it.
with that said, some of the things that people in Detroit are saying right now aren't too nice to Marco
Sure.
Casper.
Sure.
But that's also a Detroit team that's collapsed 3 years in a row in March. So
Yeah,
we'll discuss that a different time.
Yeah, we can talk about that later. No.
But no, I had Marco Casper significantly lower, and my argument was consistently he's going to play, but he's a third liner. And how much do you value that? And I think when we get to this year's draft class, there are a couple of centers that are probably going to play that are third liners and maybe have some second line upside.
Right.
That sounds a lot like Marco Casper to me, and they're being talked about as top 10 picks.
Yeah.
Kind of like how Marco Casper was talked about as a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of get what you want. You get what you deserve when you draft that kind of guy that high, and you miss out on a guy like Frank Nazar.
Yeah.
You miss out on a guy like Noah Ostlund. Like that's kind of what happens is you miss out on guys that have the upside that you probably want in those top 15 ranges. So I think that's still something that I look at and I go, unless it's an Anton Lundell, I don't know if I can get behind that potential middle six guy,
right?
Because he's gonna play for sure.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah,
I was gonna say you have to still lean into, like, this is the draft. Like, you can sign a third line center in free agency. You can trade for one. The draft is where you go and you take some swings and you go and get the guy that is gonna be a bit of a difference maker.
Yeah, I think the other one too, and then I want to move on because we only have so much time. But Fraser Minton, top 40 pick.
Yes.
I was stunned when that happened. But the takeaway for me is the game can also be played slowly. And if you can just stay a step ahead of your opponent, put yourself in good spots and be a good enough skater to do it, while also just making good passes, which is that's really all he was and is, in my opinion. He's just a sponge. You can give him the puck. He's not going to screw it up. If he doesn't have the puck, he'll put himself in a good spot to get it back. And now he's learned sort of the more physical edge to him that he's got. He's bigger, he's stronger. And I think that Toronto, it was a really clear indicator of what Toronto looks for, which is, at least with Wes Clark at the helm and now Pittsburgh, and they did this with Ben Kindle too, just guys who move the puck in ways that work. And it does not matter. The rest of the picture is just a bonus. But if you can handle the puck and you can read the game and you can drive good results, which Minton, in my experience, didn't really drive good results, but he definitely did. He never was really like screwing up. So like that has value. And especially outside the first round, again, it's like if you get anything outside the first round, you've done well. And I mean, Toronto was clearly onto something there. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting year, and I think it was very, very wide open. And I still think that it's another one of these things where a bunch of these players, if you roll the dice and they end up on a different team, I think they could have gone a completely different direction based on who they're playing with, who's coaching them. And that's the really tricky part about doing all of this, is because you never know, right? Like they might just have a really rough year because they're boxed out of the job that they want and they're down the lineup somewhere, and it's frustrating. And that can, a lost season can be awful. Brad Lambert being stuffed on the wing for year after year after year when his best results have always come at center. And it still blows my mind that they're playing him there. And it's like, well, what if he went to Montreal, right? Like, what if he's, second or third line center in Montreal right now? Like, I think that could be a perfectly reasonable outcome based on how he played and what he brought to the game. But Slafkovsky obviously has a lot of value to that team, and he does his thing really well as well, but it took a little while to get there with a lot of patience. But anyway, it's an interesting year, but the big one for me was like, if you do not really believe in the guy at the top, say so. Stick your neck out, because you never know. And I remember every time I watched Logan Cooley and Shane Wright back to back, I went, that Cooley kid can ball out, and that Wright guy, I don't have a huge problem with him, but I'm not exactly sure what it is that he's going to do in the NHL that will be worth drafting first overall.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And now we move on to 2023, where
2023.
we are getting a very interesting draft class because Matvey Michkov is hated by his coach. Zach Benson's the best player in the class, and Connor Bedard sucks, and Leo Carlson's better. So
This is
it's a fun year.
yeah. Sorry, the one I pulled up is also out of date, so bear with me a moment.
Good
Here it
job,
is.
Will.
I know, I'm fired. This one is the right one. I was wondering, this does not look right. Okay, I'll say this. I'm personally really happy with how my list looks at the moment. It's these guys are not done developing. This is 2023, so a lot of these guys are what, 21? Something like
21.
that. Like it's their first professional season for a lot of these guys this year. But that being said, a lot of it I feel pretty good.
I do have one question though
Yeah.
for you, Will. If you feel so good about it, where'd you have Emmett Finney? Huh?
Who?
Where'd you have top line
I've
left
never heard of him.
winger Emmett Finney?
I've never heard of him at Finney.
Detroit Red Wings superstar, and also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 10th highest scorer in the draft class.
Yeah. I mean, I look at the guys that got drafted in the top 50 that I didn't have ranked: Etienne Morin, Maxim Sturbach, Andrew Gibson, Ethan Gauthier, Adam Gaillon. Like, I'm fine with all of that. Oliver Bonk, I mean, he's playing in the NHL now. I still feel similarly about Oliver Bonk now as I did, but I think his skating has improved remarkably well over the course of the last few years since being drafted. But I don't know. A lot of the like, I had Dmitry Simashev at 7 and he went 6 and his average ranking was 16. That guy, that was my like, I'm going to try to value a defensive player properly this year. That's going to be my thing. And Simashev just checked so many boxes for, I say, an elite defensive player. And he's a point a game in the USHL this year. So there's that too. But I'm curious of your general thoughts on where you're at with this group.
I feel pretty good about this class. I mean, the first member of Team Ferrari, Zach Benson, is
baby.
a dog.
Yeah, that guy rocks.
And he was perfectly, wonderfully inside my top 10, whereas other people had him much lower. He's at number 6. Oliver Moore was number 7. I still feel really good about Oliver Moore in my top 10. Axel Sandin Pelika I had in my top 10. Ryan Leonard, Dmitry Simashev, like that was the guys that rounded out my top 10 beyond the top 5 guys that I think everyone kind of had in the top 5. Bedard, Fantilli, Carlson, Michkov, and Will Smith. It's like, even looking down, like I think the one big miss, probably Gavin Brindley at 12, baby. Like, clap your hands. What a stud. The one guy that I think, and there's still time and there's still room, but like Andrew Cristal is a guy that I think was a big lesson for me, in a guy that I think is still going to be interesting to track over the next few years, just because of the weird play style that he has of just being such a dominant presence with the puck on his stick in the offensive zone,
right,
and not really anywhere else. Edward Chalet was a guy that I think I had probably way higher than I probably should have. Him and Alex Chernak for sure.
Where did you have Chalet? I had him at 37.
I had him at 18.
Yeah.
I had him way too
Yeah,
high, I think,
see it with him there.
looking back in hindsight. But again, like, there was a few guys that I was in I'm sure we got to talk about our boy in this draft class. But I'm going to group him with a couple other guys that I had lower that I think feel justified. Nate Danielson, Braden Yeager, and Colby Barlow, all at the end of my first round or into the early second round.
They were all seconds to me. And
they were all guys that I didn't think that, much the way I talked about with Marco Kasper, I just didn't see it with them. And I went, you're going for a guy that at best is like in the middle of your lineup and probably on the lower end of the middle. None of them have really worked out at the NHL level as of yet. Colby Barlow is really struggling at the AHL level. Like, I talked to Colby Barlow multiple times in his draft class. Like, this was a big year for Game Tape. I thought he was a perfectly good kid, like a responsible guy. But I think there was that element of like, yeah, like this guy's physically developed already. Like there's not much physical development for this guy to go. So where's the development coming from then?
Yeah.
And with the style of play he had, I just didn't see it there. With that said, Luca Pinelli, a guy that I had like right up there with those guys. Luca Cagnoni, a guy I had right up there with those guys.
Yep.
In those guys were, in my opinion, vastly undervalued. Like they were all right there together. So it's an interesting draft class because of that. Because yeah, I look back and I go, yeah, like I see the justification for almost all of this. Like there's not really, and I mean, we're getting closer to recent rankings,
Yeah.
so like it's harder to be like, oh, this is for sure a good take and this is for sure a bad take.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's like Jaden Perron had one heck of a year this year, and he's looking really good.
Well, and that's the thing. I think the other thing too that's also really tricky is oh, someone asked if we had Cowan ranked. I did. I think he was in my second round.
Yeah, he was in my second round. I had him at like 50, I think.
I had him in here somewhere. Was that 2023?
It was
Yeah,
2022.
Oh, was it? Okay. Yeah, I think he was a second rounder to me. But yeah, like I also want to point out, this was when I started really trying to pay attention to goalies. Johnny Hicks was in here for me. I got Johnny Hicks, NCAA champion Johnny Hicks with the Merritt Centennials in here in his first draft year, and Hampton Slukinski. So maybe I was onto something there. No, but I think something else too is like, I think a big part of where Tony and I diverge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're not where we diverge, but like where we diverge from others, is I think you and I look for stuff that is really stuff you always wish you had more of in the NHL. Like,
Yeah.
like guys who can keep up and play with a level of danger to their opponent. Like that's what you're looking for. Yeah, I had Cowan at the end of the second round, so it was this year. Like, and he's a similar story of just insane smarts and playmaking, and it's so far so good. But like, it's not so much that I don't think you and I looked at guys like Dalibor Dvorsky or David Edstrom or whatever, or Charlie Stramel, and we're like, they're not good, or Samuel Hanzik. It's just like the things that they brought to the game. It's kind of like a safer sort of baseline style where it's like they're big and they're physical and they're heavy. And if that's the style of play you want to go for, then that's why those guys are going really, really high. But for us, I think you and I see the game just a little bit differently, where it's more about energy and speed regardless of size, and how like physicality and like the pure physical side of the game is a relatively minor point when you zoom out. Like it's important, but when you zoom out, when it comes time to like actually put a goal in the net, you know, it matters, but it's not for front of mind in the NHL draft, right? Like I think that there are definitely moments where, you know, I at least have leaned in the wrong direction on skill quite often.
Oh, for sure.
And that's for sure. But like, I still see guys, like you mentioned Jaden Perron, like people wrote him off so fast. And it was always there. Like you could see it, right? You could see it. And it just took the right environment. It just took the right situation and the right usage to sort of flip that switch. And I'm still waiting for that with a number of players. You know, Brindley is one. Like every time I watch Brindley in the NHL, I'm like, this guy is insane. And he hasn't gotten that Zach Benson level of trust and runway, right? Like Benson right in the NHL right away and just plays a ton, and he earns it, right? It's not like he shouldn't. But Brindley, he was an exceptional college player. He stayed in college for a while, and then he gets traded at his lowest value as a cap dump to Colorado, who is by like the best even strength team in the league, which is where Brindley thrives, and he just can't keep a job in the roster. But it's another one of those things where it's like, are you going to play him, or are you going to play the 6'4" guy who can throw hits like a Parker Kelly, right? Like, who are you going to play if you're a coach? And it's easy to write off a guy like Brindley, whereas for you and me, I think we look at him and go, well, we'll throw you over the boards, and we know exactly what you're going to do because you're Gavin friggin' Brindley. So it's really weird. It's a really weird thing that we do, but I don't know. I mean, in terms of the draft this year, I don't know. I mean, in retrospect, could I really take much away? I don't really know.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's so many of these players have so much, like a guy like Otto Stenberg is just dipping his toes in the NHL. Dalibor Dvorsky, same thing. Dylan Boots on the way. Like,
Ow.
we're just seeing these guys start to get their chances.
That too.
So
some of these guys haven't touched professional ice, right?
Yeah, like,
and they will.
And they're for sure going to. And like a guy like Matthew Wood, I didn't see as the kind of impact player that people thought he would. And all throughout his draft year, I went, man, like, this guy is a guy that loves to ride shotgun, and he has been very good at doing that.
Yes.
And he gets to the NHL level,
Yep.
and he is perfectly fine when he's able to ride shotgun.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? Like, yeah, like the thing I said worked out. I just didn't value that enough because I didn't think he'd get the chance to do that at the NHL level, to be completely honest with you. But I don't make the coaching decisions. I don't make the lines. And sometimes all it does take is a coach going, we're going to let you ride shotgun for a while here, pal. And it worked out. Like, it really does come down to that sometimes. One interesting case about this draft class that I do want to talk about a little bit is Callum Ritchie. I had him ranked much lower than a lot of people. He ended up going at the end of the first round anyways. It didn't really, like, that's right where I had him ranked, I think. He was a guy that I think has shown some promise and hasn't really been able to break through. And I think same thing we talked about with some guys. He hasn't really broken through, but he has outperformed, in my opinion, some of the guys that were ahead of him in that draft class. So he's another interesting example. And a lot of his thing was, if I'm not mistaken, it was a neck or a back injury throughout his draft year, and he kind of struggled. He came out the next year and absolutely tore it up because he got the surgery and recovered over the offseason. Like, interesting case. And I think that's a lesson as well. Like, when there's a guy that you're being told, hey, like, he's dealing with this injury and he's still having this level of success, like, if he gets past it, like you mentioned Matthew Nyes battling mono for most of his draft year, or like there's stories that go back years with that, right? Like, Timothy Liljegren dropped from a guy that was potentially a top 5 pick to a late 20 or late teens because of mono. Like, it's a thing that happens, and sometimes it gets you on track, sometimes you don't get back on track. But I think that's something that I learned to pay attention to. But like you said, there's not much to pull from a draft class that's only 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the one thing I will pull from it is Zach Benson's a dog, and then everyone that passed on him is stupid.
Exactly. Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, I think the other thing too is, you kind of touched on it. It's the continuous thing, I think, that is sort of coming into focus for me every year is, like, if there is a guy that you can see doing a thing, it's like, that's good enough. It's like, you don't need to have everything all of the time. Obviously, like, for me at the top, I see guys like Oliver Moore, who I think just has everything going for him, and I still really think he's a great player, and I love watching him play. And, like, Carlson had all the tools in the tool shed, and he was great. Same thing with Fantilli, and obviously Bedard at the top. There was no real dispute there. But if it's like the value, I think, that I'm really trying to lean into a little more now is, like, even if I'm not a huge fan of a certain subset of a player's game, like, if there's just, like, something they can do and you can identify and go, this, I could see them, that being their job in the NHL, as opposed to, like, I'm looking at Alex Chirnik next door to Gabe Perreault. That one looks stupid in retrospect, but I can see kind of how it went the way it did. I still think Perreault is a very limited player, but what he does well is impossible to ignore. Like, his finishing ability is second to none, and that has value. And whereas Chirnik, he was a very good scorer, but he was much more of a diversified skill set, and it was very much more about his puck carrying ability and how he transported it, and, like, the responsibility expected for a player of that style at the NHL level is extremely high. Whereas I feel like the NHL looks at players and goes, okay, what do you do extremely well? What can I trust you to do? And I'll put you with guys who fill in the gaps. I'll trust you and I'll put you with players who can backfill. And if you take a Gabe Perreault and you plop him on your first line and you plop him with some guys who can drive the puck up the ice and can play more physical and can set him up, then you're golden. Like, you're going to be fine. Whereas I'm looking at like Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, who I still love. I've loved watching him over the years, but his play style is very high responsibility. Like, his style of play demands a lot of being relied upon, and that can be really tough. And it's really hard to do that in the NHL. So there's a big part of me that is always looking for these guys that can do as many things as possible. But the trend that I'm spotting is looking at guys and going, forget the deficiencies. What can you look at? Like, I can look at David Edstrom and go, I mean, I didn't have him lower than he went. I had him at 34. He went 32. So, hand wringing. But like him behind a Denver Barkey, I love Denver Barkey. I think he's great. But David Edstrom, I can look at him and go, I could very easily see you being a fourth line center, just soaking up pressure, making simple plays, just keeping it super simple, super basic, and that's going to be your job. And I could see him doing it in the NHL because he's big enough and he's strong enough. Denver Barkey, there's more risk to that. It was like, I love the attitude. I love the energy. I've loved watching him in the NHL, but I didn't have that, like, but what is his job going to be outside of an agitator? And I did not have a firm baseline for that. Whereas a guy like Edstrom or even Stramel, like, I remember Stramel at Wisconsin being like, there's still a baseline here to deal with. So who knows? I mean, so that's and it's always something that you feel like you'll always never do again when you see the mistakes.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier said than done when you're watching these guys back, which is why I always am looking at my video that I'm pulling over the year, reordering my rankings blindly and just sort of seeing how I feel about these guys, because I think this year's list, for me at least, there's a lot of guys where I go, I know your job. If I'm a coach, I know what I can trust you to do, and I'm going to lean into that. Whereas a lot of these other guys, it's like it's like the what if questions. It's like there's a lot there, but like the what ifs, and that's always where you get a little sketched out, especially when you're talking about ranking a guy in like the first round these days.
Yeah, and I think that goes to another thing too, that I'm looking at all these rankings and I'm realizing that one thing I've tried to do over the last few years is, like you said, there comes a point in the draft of, like, I just need to value the guy that's going to play, and it's where that point comes in each draft class. And I think that's the thing I will struggle with till the day I die and the day I stop doing this, is where do I stop valuing the upside as much as I value this guy's going to play?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, is like, you got to, if at the end of the day, you got to find your guys that you want to take bets on and just place those bets, because like, you're not going to get them all the time. You're not going to get a guy that, like, we talked about, a guy like Oliver Kapanen. Like, we both didn't hate him in his draft class.
Right.
We went, this guy can do something.
Yep.
But like, where are you ranking that guy in comparison to a guy that could be awesome?
Right.
But like, there's also a world where he's like a Finnish all-star because he never makes it in the OH or in the NHL. So it's an interesting one. But yeah, let's move on to 2024, where I think we both have some takes.
Yes.
And it is kind of a draft class where we can't really judge too much of it yet, because like 6 of the guys have played in the NHL.
Yeah. So I personally feel pretty good about this group for me, looking back on it. Yep. I think I personally, I still feel like, even if Teddy Stiga is a middle 6 winger, you're going to watch him in the playoffs and be like, that's why we're winning a game. Like I think this was the year where I really, really, really paid attention to the Stanley Cup playoffs and really, really, really tried to look at what the best players in those games looked like and how they played. And a lot of it just comes down to who wants it more. Like, who is the more competitive athlete? Who is the one that is going to win those battles and work as a team and all those things? And I still think that regardless of where he plays in your lineup, you're going to win playoff games with this guy in your lineup. And I think that is so valuable. And I could say the same thing about Tej Iginla for sure. I think Iginla was more of a shooter to Stiga's more playmaking angle. And I think you could flip those guys around, no problem in my mind. I still think Adam Juracek has a really bright future, even if injuries have kind of stacked against him over the years. You know, I mean, I had Levshinov at 13 behind guys like Parekh. Alphonse Frey, it's been a bit of a rough road, but watching him this year, I have loved him. I thought he was spectacular at the World Juniors. He's just getting his feet wet in North America now. Like, we're getting to the point where a lot of these guys haven't even touched North American ice in a lot of cases, right? Linus Eriksson, Nikita Artemanov is another one, or anyone.
He's a weird one, man.
He's a weird one, yeah. But that's another one where it's like the Russian system doesn't always work for everybody, and it was really looking bright there for a while. And then I think a similar thing happened. When I watch him now, he seems slower, heavier, less skilled. It's like they take these young guys and go, you need to fill out. We're going to feed you borscht all day because you're too easy to push around. And then you lose everything that's special about their game. And then they get disheveled and all that stuff. And then they lose a step and then that's it. Right. But I also look at the rest of my top 40. I've got Clark Caswell in there. I thought he's looked great. Cole Beaudoin went in the first round, but I could see the value in that player. Same thing with Igor Surin.
Here's a question for you about this draft class, because it's a question.
It was a good one, by the way. There's a lot of very good players in here.
I am not loving my answer on this question,
okay.
So I want to hear yours first. Where'd you have the 3rd overall pick there, pal?
The 3rd overall pick.
Back at Seneca.
I had him at 19.
We both had him at 19. What idiots.
But I don't know. Every time the Ducks are playing, I make a point to watch Beckett Seneca, and he's still very similar to what I remember, man. Like, so talented. But it's very, again, like, I think he needs to be enabled. Like, I think he's a guy where there's a lot in his game where I think there's a lot in his game where, like, I watch him with Cutter Gauthier this year and Mason McTavish, and I went, those 3 guys play off each other perfectly. That is a situation that is a dream for all 3 of those guys. And I think with Seneca, his numbers kind of took a dive when they switched up the lines on him this year. But I mean, look, he's scoring in the playoffs, so that's great. But I think that's another one where let's see, where did my tiers for this were interesting, I think. Yeah. So he was pretty much at the top of a tier. I absolutely should have valued him more than Salayev. I was not a huge Salayev guy.
Yeah, I have that same feeling. Salayev is the guy that I had ahead of him that I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But like I just looked at like my notes on Seneca, because I had a ton of notes for this draft class. I had a full notebook, like so much detail on all these guys. In Seneca, like the common theme throughout all of the like game reports I wrote on him was this guy always makes the play, but he's always so close to not making the play. Like
that was, I remember that for sure.
Always noticed about him was that like he was as close to not like to losing the puck on a deke or making a pass that like could have like was millimeters from ricocheting off a defender's skate or something, and it just worked. And I'm like, man, like the luck, the rabbit's foot he has up his ass is not magical. Gonna last.
Magical.
And it worked at the NHL level. And I like you said, Cutter Gauthier does a lot for him. Mason McTavish really just I don't think he gets the credit for the stuff that he does do on the ice. I mean, he's been scratching these playoffs, and I think he's a guy that you could use still. So like, yes, did I have him too low? 100%. But man, the rabbit's foot is still there, and I just don't understand it.
I mean, look, he's a good player. I don't think anybody ever at least over the years, I have never doubted the talent level with the player, but
No.
it's a matter of like, you know, yeah, it's tricky. Like this is and it's tough. He went to a great spot. I think the Ducks, again, like going to a young team with a bunch of young players, it's like Montreal almost. And he's playing with the right mix and it works really well. Just like Slavkovsky, like he plays with the right mix of guys and it works really well. And again, like I'm looking at this draft and I'm going, even the guys that I had in the second round, right? Like I still think there's a pretty bright future ahead for a lot of these guys. Sam O'Reilly, Kieran Walton, Luke Osborne, Cole Hudson,
Noel Franzen.
Yeah, Nathan Villeneuve. You know, like, yeah, I had them lower, but like when I think about it and I'm being honest with myself, did I like those guys that much less than like Liam Greentree or Dominic Badinka? Like, I don't think so. Like, if I'm really trying to be as honest as I can with myself, I think maybe past Villeneuve, like past 52 for me, like Bednarik, Zemer, Shuravin, Pulkkinen, like those guys I definitely wouldn't put up in that echelon. But it was a fun year. And honestly, I think that there's a lot of still open stories here that aren't done yet.
Oh, very much.
I'm not counting out like any of these guys. I've loved Ole Josephson with North Dakota. That's another guy where I think he could be a good bottom six guy on a team I'm building. Like Yegor Surin. Like it's another one where if I'm trying to be as honest as I can, but if I was on a team and a guy like, and half the scouting team wanted Sam O'Reilly in the first round over Linus Eriksson or Dominic Badinka, you'd have to twist my arm, but you could convince me, or Artemanov, Solberg, Hemming, Pedersen, like, yeah, like it kind of, the lesson for me a little bit here is like, open your mind a little bit, I think is kind of where I'm coming from here, is like, open your mind a little bit to like, what if there were other people in the room who disagreed with you? Cause like, I think you can get into very dangerous territory thinking you're the smartest guy in the room.
Very much so.
And I think a lot of people, and I think that if I'm in a room full of people, who, like, you could convince me to take whom over whom. And I think there's a lot of really good answers to that question in this draft class, even if guys might be spread apart by 20 picks. And I think that there's still potential for a lot of guys to, like, Konsta Helenius hasn't really hit his stride in the NHL yet. Michael Hage hasn't stepped on the ice in the NHL yet. He's going back to college another year. So I don't think the story is done yet at all. I still think Demidov is my number 2. I have a hard time not doing that. But past that point, all bets were off. And I still feel that way. Like, it's an interesting group of players.
Now, the big thing about this draft class, like in hindsight, is the defensemen. Like, there were a lot of defensemen that people valued very differently in this draft class.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, very, very much so. But I think for me, from basically the start of the year, Zeev William was my guy. I had Zeev William at 5 at the end of the year.
Same.
I wanted him higher. I could have easily pushed him ahead of a guy like Caden Lindstrom. And I look at this draft class, and Sam Dickinson's played more NHL games. Zane Parekh has played in the NHL this year, but like you said, it's still very much up in the air. Like, I had Zane Parekh at 14. I probably should have had him higher realistically, but at the end of the day, I went, this guy is either going to be awesome or he's going to not be awesome.
I think that's still true. I think that is still true.
Yeah, I still very much, like, watching Zane Parekh at the NHL level this year was exactly what I was worried about with Zane Parekh at the NHL level.
It's just going to be, can he get over it? Like, can he grow, right?
Exactly. Unfortunately, when Zane Parekh was born, he doesn't get the advantage that some player is going to get next year, where at 19, you're going to go back to the OHL and just kick dudes' heads in. Like, you are going to dominate at a ridiculous level that does not benefit you. And it's not going to be good for your development, especially for a player like Parekh, who has always kicked everyone's head in offensive.
Right. Are you ready for
going back to the OHL was not an answer.
Right.
Going to the NHL, was not an answer because he
No.
just got his head kicked in.
Yeah.
Like that didn't help him.
Yeah.
Like going to the World Juniors, we got to see junior hockey Zane Parekh again, and that was fun for a little bit. But like even at the World Juniors, there were still some issues.
Yeah.
Despite how many points he had. Next year, we're going to have possibly, it's not set in stone yet. The WHL commissioner was very, very insistent that is not for sure happening. But based on what everyone else has told me, the AHL will have a 19-year-old exemption, one per team. They're still working on how to figure out all the rules and everything. But a guy like Zane Parekh could play in the AHL next year. And that would have been incredibly beneficial for a guy like him this year, because in the short stint he did when he got I think it was a conditioning stint in the AHL, that was probably the best hockey he played this year.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where you need a guy like that to play. We saw Carter Yakimchuk get games in the NHL this year, which is crazy. Because he scored a goal and everyone was like, look how smart Ottawa is. And then I watched his games and I went, he's not ready, but that goal was cool, I guess.
Well, that sounds familiar. That sounds about right for him,
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I look at this draft class and I look at the defensemen in the class again and I go, yeah, like there's a lot of guys that I think I still feel very good about where I have them. Artem Levshinov was at the tail end of my top 10. Alphonse Frey was right there. Sam Dickinson was right there. Adam Juracek was right outside the top 10.
Yeah.
It's an interesting group. Like I think Noel Franzen's been good. I really like Noel Franzen. I think having him at 36 is not a bad idea. Thomas Galvis is going to get drafted finally this year.
Maybe.
Ludwig Johnson finally did get drafted last year. There is a ton of really interesting players in this draft class. One guy I do want to bring up, though, because I think he fell drastically. I think everyone had him in this range, but Aron Kiviharju at 52 for me was I think that was on the higher end for his ranking.
Let's see.
But
his average was 46. So you and I
wasn't even on the
lower.
higher.
Yeah, he was at 51 for me, but that's not too big. That's not too much of a difference.
But he's a guy that coming into the year, he was talked about as potentially one of the first Finns to go first overall. And he had a year from a nightmare. Yeah. And it's just not it exposed everything that was a flaw in his game and a concern. And he's had some good moments, but he still struggles with all of those things. And I think that's a really interesting case study to look back on, because we talked earlier about that U6 or that 16-year-old year, that 17-year-old year, that draft -1 for a lot of these guys, just how special it was. This is a kid that we were talking about from 14, 15.
He wasn't even in high school. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the numbers he was putting up overseas were just unreal.
Yeah.
And then you get him under the spotlight and you start picking apart his game more in depth, because now we have time to do it, because you and I have talked about this a million times. Everyone who puts out a 2027 or 20 craziness of 2028 early lists is insane. What do you not have a job? Do you not have anything to do with your life? At the end of the day, I spend so much time every day watching players in the current draft class.
Yeah.
And I'm still this year's draft list, I just put it on top 75. I don't know how much longer that list is going to be by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I every year I kind of force myself to put it on top 100. Last year I didn't. I got to 80 and I was like, I think I'm calling it. I got some honorable mentions after that. That's how I got guys like Ivan Fomin and some of the other guys I liked into the list. But yeah, I think you force guys into these late rounds and whatnot, and with a guy like Aron Kiviharju, you watch him for a couple of years, you see him at these showcase events at the World Juniors or whatever, at these different things, and you're like, oh, he's gonna grow. He's gonna grow from here. Don't worry. Like, yeah, he didn't look great, but he's gonna grow. And sometimes they don't. Like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just don't develop, and that's okay. Like he's gonna go and have a great career in Finland probably, and maybe he does eventually get to the NHL, and he's just never gonna be what people once thought he was.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it's kind of the whole rub of the whole thing. It's like the uncertainty of all of it is a little bit, yeah. I think we can move on to 2025 here, because 2024, yeah, it was kind of for me the year of like, oh, like if you like Cole Baudouin and you don't like Lucas Pettersson, I see why, and I could see why you would do it. But those guys were, or yeah, like, yeah, I don't know. And there were a lot of guys who, like, I'm looking at the guys that I would have drafted if I were running, if you're not familiar, I draft for Toronto's picks, and I came away with like Kieran Walton and Thomas Galvis and Ludwig Johnson, and all those guys were like late round picks. Like there were some good players that slipped through the cracks a little bit, but I still think that this is another 2023 was a really good year when we looked at it just now, but 2024 is looking like another good one. Like there's a lot of solid hockey players in here. And again, like even more so than the previous one, like this draft basically just happened. And a lot of these guys are nowhere close to being done, whatever trajectory. Someone asked about Sam Dickinson. I mean, I think if the concerns are the same as what they were, and I would say yes. It's a similar profile in the NHL. It's not to say that he's not a good player, but he is a player that I think has a lot of improvements to make in some pretty key areas, but the talent and the fundamentals are impossible to ignore. I don't know how you feel about Dickinson nowadays, but watching him with San Jose, like he's a little bit more comfortable out there, but similar sort of strengths and weaknesses, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think my concerns with Dickinson are all that crazy, to be honest. Like it's just he's going to be an NHL defenseman. I never had any doubt that he was going to be an NHL defenseman. It's where does the upside land? Because I just, like with some of the defensemen in this year's draft class, I don't think the upside is where some other people think it is, and I think that's where you get some wonky evaluations at times.
Yeah. All right, so let's do this. All right, so 2025. Okay. Well, 2025, man, I'm looking up and down this list, and again, I still feel relatively good about it in retrospect. I mean, it's very similar, where it opened up relatively quick, especially past, for me on my list, like Frondell. I think my tier there, I can just look. Like I love Eric Nilsson and Lyndon Lakovich and Bill Zanon, but I also like Cole Reshny was in the same tier. Braden Coots, Ben Kindle, Caleb Denvoyer, like a lot of solid players who I think are all like nowadays like percolating around the same kind of like level for varying reasons. But I don't know because like for me in 2025, my big thing was Eklund at 4 and Potter at 5. And watching both of these guys this year, I still stand by it. I might have put Martone ahead of Potter in retrospect, but I still think Potter, if he hits, especially because Martone's in 06 and Potter's in 07, like I still think if he hits, he could be absolutely dynamite in the NHL. And we'll see what happens at Michigan State, but he seemed to just be getting his legs going this year and then got hurt and missed the rest of the year. But how are you feeling about 2025, even though we're not even a year out from it?
Yeah, I feel good overall about the class. Like I look at up and down my list, and I don't feel bad about almost any of it. I had Hagens at 3, Eklund at 4, Frondell at 5, Martone, Lakovich, Jackson Smith, Carter Bear, Jake O'Brien. Like that was the round out of my top 10. But the question I get all the time about this year's draft class, or the 2025 draft class, is Misa versus Schaefer. And I was the guy that had Misa ahead of Schaefer. And listen, this year, AJ likes to say, my close personal friend for everybody that he's been in an interview with Game Tape with.
Do you know him?
But I've interviewed both those two so many times. I to be completely honest, I've texted them both this year during their rookie seasons.
Nice.
I think they're both awesome people. I think they're both like really fantastic players. I look back and I feel perfectly fine justifying it the exact same way I did last year.
Ooh.
Michael Misa is, in hindsight, like reevaluating a year now, like I have more data, I have new things to go on, which is a big thing for my argument last year. Michael Misa put up an incredible season in the OHL. And this is the last season where we didn't have guys leaving to go to the NCAA, and he still put up monster numbers. He really was fantastic, and I didn't expect him to step into the NHL and be a force immediately. So
Yeah,
it's not like he's like not tracking towards what I still think he can be. Like, especially with the insulation of having Macklin Celebrini, like I think this sky is the limit for that kid. I think he's still going to be very, very good. The reason Schaefer ended up at number 2, because they were both tier 1. Michael Misa, Matthew Schaefer, 1A, 1B all season long. That's kind of how it ended up being, especially in the back half. Matthew Schaefer played like 27 games total if you group in the Hlinka, the World Juniors, the Erie Otters. Like every competition he played last year was under 30 games. And yes, he was fantastic in some of those 30 games. And there were some moments where I still looked at concerns and whatnot. And I wondered, is the skating, like the skating was always shifty. It was elite, like edge work. It was always unreal to be able to like go laterally the way he does in different things. But did he have the pull away speed to truly make it that same kind of impact, play his game at the NHL level? And that was my one question. I think obviously he's proven me wrong.
I think he's proven everybody wrong.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing no one talks about, is no one expected this.
Nobody did.
Everyone expected he's a very good defenseman, the best defenseman in the draft class, and no doubt about it. He should be the first overall pick. And I when people ask me who should go first overall, I said Matthew Schaefer's probably going to go first overall. He should go first overall based on where the Islanders are at. Like, it makes sense. He has a longer runway, I thought, to develop because of the limited amount of games he played, the injuries that he suffered last year multiple times. Like,
yeah.
With that said, like, yeah, he's the best player in this draft class. And like, that's not a crazy thing to say 1 year out when like 7 guys have played NHL games and like none of them have played a full season outside of Matthew Schaefer. Basically.
Yeah, this is where it does get really tricky, because it's like, well, I don't know.
Like, we can ride that victory lap all we want, but like there's still so much room for this draft class. Like, would it blow my mind if Schaefer ended up like last year was like his best year?
Yeah.
Like that like, sure, great. Like that's happened before many times with NHL defensemen stepping into the NHL, right? Yeah. Like, listen, I don't think Matthew Schaefer's Dion Phaneuf, but Dion Phaneuf came into the NHL, put up 20 goals, and everyone's like, this is a future Norris winner.
Yep.
And then he never was.
Yeah. Well,
like, I think Matthew Schaefer has a much better career than Dion Phaneuf. I need to make that very clear before someone flips me. But like, yeah, like this draft class 2025 is so fresh. Like, we haven't seen these guys, right? Like, Anton Frundell came in, he was fantastic, but like, is he going to keep that same pace next year when he's in the NHL full time? Like, Porter Martone's been awesome. I love Porter Martone. I had him at 6. Like, he's a stud.
Yeah.
Does he keep the same pace going into next season? Like, there's still so much growth. And now that NHL teams have seen these guys face up, they're going to know how to counter them a little bit. And I'm not saying any of these guys get countered perfectly or anything like that, but there's so much room in this draft class that, yeah, like it's a very interesting class and it's a fun class. Like, I remember looking back at last year, going into the year and going, I don't know how much fun I'm going to have with this class. And by the end of the year, I'm like, I really like this draft class.
Yeah.
Like, I loved the 2025 class. And like you said, like, you go up and down your list and you're like, I still feel very good. I still love the fact that I had Zonin at 14. I love the fact that I had Potter up in the top 12. Like, a guy like Michael Sverchek, who hasn't necessarily had the best season.
Yeah, he's had a rough year.
but like I still love his game and I still love what he could be. A Cole Rushney, absolutely fantastic. Like
Yeah.
people were questioning whether he deserves to be a first round pick, and I'm like, he more like your boy, Pittsburgh Penguins all time great, Benjamin Kindle. Like seeing guys like that high up my list, it's fun. Like the human highlight reel, who's really only good on highlight reels, Riker Lee. Like that guy has put up some of the best highlights we've seen all season.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that I feel good about my ranking at 32 with. Like it's a fun draft class, and I think we've seen a lot of these guys already prove their worth
Right.
At whatever level they've been at so far.
I think the other thing too is like I still stand by, you and I talked about this all the time last year, but like last year was really the draft of projectable, like middle of your lineup dudes.
Yeah.
But like decent ones at that. Like my third tier is filled with those guys. Nilsson, Zanon,
Yeah.
Bear, Martin, O'Brien, Desnoyers, Hensler, Kindle, Coots, McQueen. Who else is in there for me? Maybe Carbonneau even. Mertka, Smith, Reshny. If those guys all hit, to me, it was like, yeah, good middle of the lineup guys. And I don't know which one I would want more. Like the big thing for me, I think if we're talking about like lessons learned or something I kind of tried to go out of my way to like think about a little more was like just the people. Like bringing you on board was really great, and it's been great because we get the experience of like interacting with them. And I remember like with Cole Reshny, like I loved every interview I saw him do, and I thought he had such good things to say about his own game and such good things to say about reflecting on himself. And that alone, like if I were working for an NHL team, that alone, I had him lower than the average and I had him pretty low, but I still just went but I feel like he would just nail an interview and just be the best guy, and I would very easily have slotted him in the teens. You know, clearly something with Kindle was going right as well because Pittsburgh did their thing. But it's also like when all is said and done, could all of these guys kind of all have a similar-ish spot in an NHL lineup? Sure. I think beyond that point, it dropped off pretty quick, right? Like I'm looking at like Schmidt and Reed and Mooney and Lee and Hillstrom, and like I think there's a lot of risk with those guys. There might be maybe a Malcolm Spence who could be a bottom six guy too, but I still feel pretty comfortable about those guys being a little bit lower. Maybe an Eddie Yenborg should have been a little higher, but I still feel like he's a bit of a wait and see type guy based on how he was used in I was going to say Russia, in Sweden. But beyond that, I mean, there's not, like it's still so early to be too critical. Julius Sumpf on my watch list. Nice. Always love that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Let's talk about a couple Russian guys then. Like that I think we should talk about. Like obviously the guy that everyone had high or initially, Ivan Ryabkin.
Right.
Like he was at 64 on my list by the end of the year. Like it's not like he really did anything this year to go, you know what, I missed on him. I think that he should have been better. He should have been this, he should have been that. Like he was kind of a guy, like he put up a lot of points, but like I watched him and I felt very similarly about Ivan Ryabkin this year.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, like is the off ice stuff going to be an issue for him going forward? And then the other guy is Alexander Zhuravsky. Like, is he the guy that ends up falling to the Russian thing that we talked about with guys like Artemonov and guys like different like Russian players over there who stayed in that Russian development system, put on weight or did whatever, changed their game drastically. Like everyone in Montreal loves this kid. Everyone that sees highlights of this kid loves this kid. I watched him this year. I love this kid. Is he going to last? Is he going to continue to be this kid? Like, that's my question.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's, I think Ufa is a little bit of a different, like Salavat Yulive is a little bit different, I think.
No, yeah.
But I see what you're saying. Like it'll be interesting. I think Yeah, like I mean, the Russian class last year on paper was not particularly amazing. And like, look,
No.
I also like I gotta say this too. Like, I was talking to a few Russians in the summer when I was in PEI, and they were super psyched about the O9s. And I asked the person that I was talking to, a couple of them, about what they thought of Zhuravsky. And I think if you asked them now what they think, they'd go, nobody saw him being this productive. Like they were not super psyched about him being like this premier talent in Russia. And I still believe that he is a very fun to watch player and a very skilled player, but the NHL is still a bit of a ways away, I think, based on what I remember from this year. But still, I mean, yeah, like there was a lot of people poo-pooing last year's draft class, and I don't think it's like gonna be filled with like the most incredible players ever. But I think also the other thing too, I think a number of players took a really big jump quicker than I expected. Braden Coots is definitely one. Ben Kindle obviously is one. Who's the other one? Oh, Carter Bear looked a lot better than I thought he would when I watched him this year. Even if he wasn't the most productive guy in the world. Porter Martone with Michigan State seems to be, it's like all of a sudden he's like, oh, I'm a monster and I can behave like a monster. And now he is, right? Like there wasn't quite that level of like oomph in his game when he was with Brampton. It almost was like he was playing a little bit down to his opposition. And that clearly kind of like reversed itself pretty quick with Michigan State. I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting year and there's still tons of time to go. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it did. I'm looking now, it did drop off quite a bit, but looking at the guys I didn't have ranked that got drafted, I mean, I didn't have Nesbitt ranked and I've watched a bunch of them this year and I still don't know what I would have done with him last year.
Oh boy.
You know, like maybe I should have ranked him somewhere, but it's one of those things like over the years I've kind of learned like if there's never a point where I'm going to like push for the guy and it's reasonable, like it's not reasonable they'll be available when I do, then what's the point, right? Like what's the point in ranking a player like that other than just being like, well, I don't want to look too stupid if I don't have him ranked at all, but it's like I just don't, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I just don't see it, you know. A lot of goalies on here. I stopped ranking goalies at a certain point. I just kind of kept it separate. So like, but like Charlie Serrato, I guess you could say probably deserved a little more attention from me. But other than that, a year later, in terms of skaters, I don't know. I'm looking up and down the list of guys drafted that I didn't have ranked. And there's not a ton.
I'd just like to say Charlie Serrato, member of Team Ferrari from the 2023 draft.
Oh, okay.
I drafted him in his draft eligible year because he's a stud.
He's a winner.
He's a winner.
All right. Well, before we go for the evening, let's do one last thing here while I toggle back over. So let's take a fresh look at 2026 here. Let's do this. I'll go back to our faces because people haven't seen our faces for 2 hours and we're just that beautiful. But like looking at 2026, based on like everything we just kind of went over and like what lessons learned, all that stuff, where do you feel now? Like on this year with like what is something maybe in your mind now that you might not have considered all that much 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago?
I think the one big thing is we talked about it, and I think with this year's defensemen, it really does stand out to me is guys that will like play important roles on their teams. And I think Malte Gustafsson is maybe the poster child of that in this draft class for me. Not particularly ranked super high by everybody. Like he's not a guy that I think I look at draft class or draft lists and I'm like, oh, like he's sitting in the top 10. For me, he's my number 2 ranked defenseman right now, admittedly in a glut of defensemen, but like he's a guy that I think like I watch him and I go, you are the best pure like defensive defenseman in this draft class, and you took a step up to the SHL level and got better. And that's weird and doesn't happen. But the reason he got better was because he added the element of physicality. And it's almost like he was like not hitting young children because he felt like he was going to get an assault charge. And then he went and played men. He's like, I'm not going to get one here. So I'm going to hit guys. I'm going to be physical. I'm going to push them around along the boards. I'm going to use my size more effectively. So that's kind of one of the things for me. And I think the other thing too is going back to that Marco Rossi year and really just committing to the fact that, like, you know what? I don't care that he's 5'10". Viggo Bjork is awesome. Like,
Right.
this guy is arguably the best center in the draft class. And I don't think it's with the center that people think it should be. I think him and Tynan Lawrence are the two centers in this draft class that deserve to be talked about as the top center. For me, it's not particularly close with any of the other centers in the draft class. So I think that's the big thing for me is, like, you got to commit and you got to look at the guys and say, like, I talked about Marco Casper and they're like being a third line center. And there's a couple guys in this draft class, and I don't want to crap on anybody right now, but that there are going to be third line centers with maybe low end number 2 upside. And I just, how high can you really push those guys? And that's my big question is, like, there's defensemen in this draft class that I look at and I go, what are you? Like, you haven't figured out what you are. So how am I supposed to do it? Because
Right.
one game you're pushing pace and you're trying to join the rush offensively, and maybe your skating isn't quite where it needs to be to do that. Or maybe there's another game where you have the size and the strength and you can play a good positional defensive game, but you're relying on leaning out and trying to poke with your length, and you're not closing gaps or playing an effective defensive game, even though you're in position. Like, a lot of the lessons I've learned throughout the last few years, I've kind of just, I feel better about some of the things in this draft class. The one thing that I after this conversation where I continue to debate, and it's been an internal debate all year, is the Stenberg versus McKenna at the top of the draft class for me.
Right.
You have the two left wingers. They're very different players. They're effective in so many ways, in so many different ways. And I think that's the big thing. Does Gavin McKenna end up being the number 1 guy? Probably, because that upside just truly is so high in terms of production wise and point making. But Ivar Stenberg, like, I still don't think people are giving him credit. And I think he's not going to get credit because we talked about it earlier, but, like, people still ignore Europe to a degree. Obviously, they know Europe exists and they know these players are good, but they just don't value them the way they should. I think, like, Stenberg's name is up there above so many great Swedish players, and it's really only the Sedin twins that he's sandwiched between. So it's like, I don't know, man. Maybe he's awesome. Like,
I mean, it also is a really good year for Europeans. And I mean,
yeah,
a couple of things, I think this year, a couple of things are going on here. Number one, at least for me, like, I'm just having more fun. Like, I'm having more fun just watching these guys and just kind of just like, it's less stress about, like, oh my God, I need to be right. And I think there's a lot of people who really are hard on the, I don't want to look stupid, and pointing the finger at someone who's different and going, look how dumb this person looks. Because I think we've learned, looking back at this over the years, is like, the NHL draft is not always so simple. It's not always this striated thing. And sometimes it really comes down to where a player goes, who they're playing with, who's coaching them. And at the end of the day, all you can really do is trust that your analysis is good and detailed enough that you can make a detailed enough case for, again, I think that what is the player going to do for you? What is their job going to be? And what type of player do they kind of need to be blended with in order to sort of do what they can do really, really well? And that's the lens that I'm always looking through. And at the same time, I think I am looking at the floor of a player a little bit more. And I'm looking at, like, I'm watching guys like Nikita Klepov and JP Hurlburt and I had another one in my head, Marcus Nordmark, like Nicholas Aram Olsen, these really skilled players, these guys where I would think in 2020, 2021, 22 might be in the middle of my first round, might be in the later parts of my first round. Alexander Coman, same thing. But Then I watch guys like Ilya Morozov, Adam Anderson, Casey Mutrin, and Oliver Suvanto, and I just go, yeah, but these guys, if they're on an NHL roster, I can so easily identify what they can do for me, and I don't have to worry as much. Like, it's that hint of a concern with the other guys, and watching like an Arm Olsen at the under 18s. I think I saw a lot of evidence for that as well. Same thing with Nordmark. It's like, it's not about their talent level. It's about what you're going to get out of them at the highest of high levels, and the confidence you have in that. And it's not to say that like you're aiming lower for those players, I don't think, but it's a matter of like, that is a valuable thing too. Like a guy like Oliver Suvanto, there is value in a guy like that. And there's so many things in his profile that is very interesting, that based on his, you know, a bit of clunky skating and more of a physical approach and a slower speed of play, a few years ago, I'd probably have him in my second round. But this year I'm sort of sitting and going, no, like, I think there's something there to this guy that could play on my team. But at the same time, I still do believe in the really high-end tools guys, right? Like, I still really do believe that in the right hands, guys like Adam Novotny, Wyatt Cullen, Elton Hermanson, they could be great players. Even in even the guys I already mentioned, in the right hands with the right situation and the right trajectory. Klepov, you know, it's not like I don't like these players, right? And it's really tough when you're lower on these guys than everybody else. But it's like, it's just a matter of like, there's other guys that I see a clearer path. I see that job ahead of them, and there's less uncertainty. And I find that a lot of the time over the years, I'll rank guys where I have less certainty, but more like excitement, right? There's more like, I have a lot of fun watching them. Whereas now it's like, I don't know, watching Oliver Suvanto isn't the most fun thing in the world, but he gets the job done. And for what he's doing it pretty well. But at the same time, I can also watch a Wiggo Sorensen and go, I love this guy and think that he's awesome, and I just don't care what anybody thinks. And that's going to be it. He's in my first round because I don't care if I'm wrong, because I'm having fun. Like, I mean, obviously, if I was doing this for a job, my angle is always like, yeah, you put them where you believe that they belong, but you try to get as many of those guys in the draft as possible. So if I'm in the first round, am I drafting Wiggo Sorensen? No, I'm going to draft an Ilya Morozov or a Tommy Blale or a Jack Hextall or whatever. And then in the third round, I'm going, I've got a guy in my first round right there. And you run the numbers, you run the simulations, and a scout told me that. Is like, a scout for an NHL team told me that's a big part of their strategy. It's not drafting the best player in their minds that is available, because that's also very nebulous, but it's about getting as many players at the top end of your board as possible. And that's a very different concept. And not every team does it that way, but when you do it that way, a lot of the times it really works out when you just do your research and do all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'll throw it back to you. Do you have any final subjects or thoughts or stuff you want to put out there that you've been hankering or hanging on to for the entire show?
Well, I think that's one thing that you talked, like one thing you just talked about was that scouts sometimes run the numbers and they look at things and they go, I love this player X is going to be there. But he's ranked higher on my board, but I know I can get him in the third round. So I'm going to draft this other guy on my board as well. That's something that I think the team scouting exercise, the team Ferrari exercise that I stole from you. That's something that has really, truly given me like that. Like, I can wait on this guy, so I'm going to draft this guy and hopefully get that guy on the turn. Like, you use Toronto's picks. I use Detroit's picks because I live across the river from Detroit. I'm not a Detroit Red Wings fan. I need to make that very clear because people think I am. I hate all teams equally. But no, like, understanding the concept of like, I value this year, for example, if I had to pick in the early first round and I had to pick in the high first round, if I had to pick at, let's say, 8 and I had to pick at 23, Mathis Preston is on my board and I love him. I think he's a fantastic player, but I go, you know what? Like, Malte Gustafsson is there.
Yep.
I'm going to go grab Malte Gustafsson at 8. And then at 23, I'm probably still going to be able to get Mathis Preston because the NHL seems to hate this kid.
You won't get Gustafsson.
And then I get 2. Yeah, exactly. And I won't get Gustafsson.
Yeah.
So I can go get Mathis Preston and then I can settle for a a Casey Mutrin, who I genuinely like, but I could also go get Gustafson and Preston, and that would be awesome. And then as for like this year's lessons and in looking at this year's draft class and just general thoughts, and you were every player you mentioned in your little spiel there, you're like JP Hurlbert and Oliver Suvanto and different players. You were Casey Mutrin. Every time you mentioned a player, I went back in the conversation we just had, the last 2 hours of conversation going back to 2020, and I went, Casey Mutrin, that's the Matthew Nyes lesson. JP Herbert, that's the Andrew Cristal lesson. And like you can go back and do that kind of thing. So I think that's the value in doing something like what we just did tonight in going over like 6 years worth of draft, 6 years worth of draft, and going, where did I mess up? Where did I do good? Where was I right? And where was I wrong? And at the end of the day, like as much as we want to talk about where we were right, because that maybe justifies where we think we're going to be right this year and where people are yelling at me online and where people are yelling at you online and why you have this player so low. Well, because it reminds me of a situation I had, and I was pretty right about that one 5 years ago.
Yeah. I also feel like there's a word that doesn't exist to describe a feeling you get when you watch a player that's probably going really high and you just don't see it. I don't know if insanity is the word. It's more like it's a type of anxiety and frustration combined where you're like, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if you experience the same thing, but generally you know what that feeling feels like, and you may as well just say, I believe that feeling and I will be willing to see where it goes. And there's a few guys that were in the, like, I'm thinking back to like Rutger McGroarty and Colby Barlow and stuff, and Sasha Pastujov, where all these guys, where it's like everybody's talking about them and there's all this yada yada yada, and you're just like, I don't know, man. And there's that feeling, right? Watching Owen Power is like the clear cut number one. It's like you know, it's the same thing with Shane Wright. Like that's where that lesson comes from. Is like if you have that visceral angstration, like anxiety, frustration, like frustsiety, then you're like, I feel like I just need to go with it and call it there. Like, and this year it's kind of a hybrid of everything. I mean, I think for me too, and then we can sort of let you go, but for me too, I know for a fact that my gamble this year is that the Canadian Hockey League is far, far, far less competitive. And I'm leaning into that. And I think that is the thing that throws a lot of people off when they see my list. They go, how do you not have this guy here? How do you not have this guy here? Why do you have Mathis Preston so high if you don't like the CHL? And what about this and this and this? And it's like, man, it's really hard to explain unless you watch all kinds of different hockey. Like I watched today a ton of CHL hockey and then watched an under 19 game between Sweden and Finland to track my last game of Verdi Svensk, where he was awesome, by the way. By and large, not all the time, but he was awesome. And the speed of that game, the pace of the play at that level, it was so crazy. Like it was completely different. And it's a thesis that like, it's going to be the lesson for this year, 5 years from now, right? Like, it's like, you're going to look back and be like, wow, I undervalued the Canadian Hockey League, and JP Hurlbert actually is, and Liam Ruck and his twin brother are the next Sedin twins, right? Like maybe that's what's the case that is staring me right in the face right now. But you kind of have to be willing to do stuff like that sometimes, where you're just like, I don't know, I'll put my chips on the table on something that I think is there. And if I'm right, I'm right. And it's going to be great. And if I'm wrong, it's going to hurt a lot. But then you go, okay, you know, all right, I'm missing something. I got to think about it. But I mean, it's interesting after everything we've done, looking at the list I've got and going, okay, there's a little bit of this there. There's a little bit of this too. There's a little bit of this too. And I am trying to be a lot more open-minded about like, I'm not the only person out there. And so if I'm working with other people, how could they convince me to think a certain way? And that's what's been really great doing office hours with the community people. Like, because not everybody thinks like me, and that's fine. And I will still have my own conviction, but hearing other people's opinions on something that might happen, a play that might not go the right way, like what are they thinking? What's this and this and this? It's a good test of like, you know, these people are watching the same stuff I'm watching. And, you know, like it's a very interesting thing that we haven't done in prior years. So we'll see what happens on that front. But like, it's a very interesting year. There's a lot going on. We've learned a lot, I think, over the last 6 years. I don't know. My voice is starting to get shot, so I'll throw it back to you before we go. But yeah, just mostly this year, just having fun, man. Just trying to have fun. Life's too short.
No, I agree with you. It's a fun year. Like, I genuinely think it's a very fun year. I mean, this is the first like year in a few where we have a really strong defensive class. I think that's been tons of fun. We've got no centers, like, outside of a couple, and that's a big change. And I think that's going to be interesting to see as well. But like, is there a lesson to be learned from years past with a guy like Xavier Villeneuve? That's going to be something that's really interesting to see over the next few months, as the draft happens and summer goes on and people judge things and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be really interesting because this is a really interesting draft class. And one thing you were talking about was like, I'm not the only person that's doing this, and if I were on a team, I'm not the only person in the room. I think the other thing, people that don't pay attention to the draft, like sycophants like you and I are, or psychopaths like Scott Wheeler,
Nut jobs, yeah,
or different people throughout the industry, right? Like, yes, like you can yell at me all you want about Caleb Malhotra not being in the top 5, or Carson Carroll's not being as high as others, or why I have Mathis Preston high, or how Melty Gustafson and Albert Smith are my top 2 defensemen, or whatever you want. But the reality is, the more I talk to teams in the NHL, the more I gain connections and stuff, the more I realize, like, the lists are very different.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
There are 32
it would make your head
vastly
spin,
different lists. Like,
yeah.
There are some players that you would be blown away were top 15 on a team's list, and they got them in the 3rd round because they did exactly what you and I were talking about. We're like, we value this guy really high. We think we can get him later. And like, there was a team, and I won't say who it was, so I don't want to get into things. Like, last year at the draft, or sorry, 2 years ago at the draft, they came to, like, I was talking to somebody and they said, we got 4 guys in our top 20. And I went, 4? And they're like, yeah, like that's a thing we loved this year. There was some really good value we felt in this year's draft, and people were undervaluing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, all right, man. Like, in the crazy thing is, I had 3 of those guys in my top 22, and like the other guy was like not too far outside. So my list was close to theirs, but that means it was very not close to 10 other teams, or 15 other teams, 20 other teams. So I think that's the other thing too, is we get in this groupthink bubble in public draft scouting and stuff like that, and public draft analysis, where why are you so different than Craig Button and Corey Pronman and this and that and Cam Robinson and EP and all these? Because at the end of the day, I'm not sitting in a room with them and I'm not watching it. Like, I'm not. They value things differently than I am. Just like the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Boston Bruins all value different things.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the reality of talent evaluation, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think out of all the drafts across sports, I'm a big fan of the NFL. I'm a big fan of the NBA. I follow their drafts like as a fan, not as a in-depth draft analysis like myself, like this. But the NBA, it seems like there's like a pretty good consensus of like the top 15, 20 guys, like the lottery guys. The NFL, there seems to be a good consensus on like, these are like the 1st round, 2nd round grade guys, but like, it's a very positionally based draft. Like, the Ravens aren't drafting the same things as the Steelers, like in most years. They both have guys that they value, because the Ravens don't need a quarterback and the Steelers don't need a defensive lineman. Like, that's just how that works in the NFL. In hockey, it's very different. It is, you are drafting for 3 years from now, probably. And if you draft for need, you're probably going to screw yourself, because 3 years from now, you might not have that need anymore, or you might have a bigger need. So you got to draft the best player available, in my opinion. And that's why, like, that's how I value my list. Like, I don't try to, I'm not predicting how the draft is going to go. If you want that, read one of my mock drafts. I'm predicting how I think the player's development from this point forward is going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And you never really know. You never know. It's really impossible to know. I do want to mention before you go, someone left a comment that is blowing my mind. What's the difference between Malhotra and Ryan Green in his draft year? That is literally something that came up today in the scouting server watching Caleb Malhotra. I finished his data set today, and I went through my data set to find someone who lined up with him in some way. And the two guys, it was a bunch of randoms, and Ryan Green and Jake O'Brien. That's it. So take that for what you will. But the fact that the person mentions Ryan Green, and that was the one that kind of snuck up on me when I was watching, when I was looking at the list of guys that kind of met the criteria, I went, you know what? What I remember of Ryan Green in the USHL or whatever when he was a draft, you know what? Like, there's kind of something there a little bit. Like, I kind of get where that person's coming from. And now having someone actually point that out is really messing with my head. Just needed to get that out before the show ended. I'm sure there was more I wanted to say, but I think it's time we let you go. It's almost bedtime. It's almost nighttime. Nighttime. Yeah. Put your nightcap on and get your little wee willy winky thing and go to bed. Tony, thank you so much for joining me. This was a ton of fun. Something people have been asking for, and the people are sometimes right. So, yeah, no, really, really good to have you. And it's been a hoot.
I always have fun with you, Will. You're a good person. You're a stupid idiot when it comes to the draft stuff. But that's where we get along, because so am I.
The psychoticness of it cancels each other out. The two negatives make a positive, I suppose. But it's the last couple weeks. Anything you want to say before we go? Plugging anything? Thoughts before the end of the season? I'm sure we'll have you on before the draft or something.
Yeah, I'll be back.
Yeah.
Follow me on the Twitter thing at @DTonyFerrari. Read my stuff at the Hockey News. Whenever AJ gets to finishing editing a few of the game tapes, there'll be a couple more that come out before the draft.
Yep.
Just enjoy this. And remember, like, not every list is the same. Value diversity, value differing opinions, and try to understand why, especially when I'm not doing something other people who maybe my boss do, where they just write a single name and no explanation. Look at the fucking dang expletive. Look at the blurb I wrote, because there's a lot in there.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing and then we'll go. And I already forgot it. Oh my god, my brain is so decroded. That's crazy.
I'm so proud of you.
Oh, one thing a scout told me that has always stuck with me is when I sent them my last list that I put out, the phrase that they used was scorching hot but entirely defensible. And that is, I don't know if they realized it, but that is such a great compliment to me. Like, it's clear that there's a thesis behind the work, but it's whack relative to what's out there. So I'll take it. Yeah. It could be way worse. And I think that'll be it for the evening. Tony, thank you so much. You're the best. You hung in there for a while. And we'll see you when we see you. All right, dude. Have a good one.